listening to Radio Sputnik. Telling the untold.
Fault lines.
Live from across the divided states of America, it is time now for another edition, the last edition this week, in fact, of the most disruptive show covering news, politics, and events from across these disunited states and the surface of our increasingly divided globe. In the independent corner, I'm your political analyst, Shane Stranahan.
And in the left corner, I am the indefatigable, a burning ember in the darkness, your political analyst, Jamarl Thomas.
And together we are Fault Lines with Thomas and Stranahan. All right, good morning again, everyone. Hope you all had a wonderful night. In D.C., it was stormy last night. Jamarl, did you experience that?
Yes, we did.
At a couple of points during the evening, I got like flash flood alerts, and I looked outside, and sure enough, it was flooding. And then at a certain point, my brother and I were like, okay, this seems over. We got a tornado warning.
Really?
On our phones that, apparently there's a tornado warning by the White House last night.
That's interesting.
And apparently there was a small tornado.
Near
That's
the White House.
I saw that this morning. I was looking into that exactly. Tornado warning,
Yeah.
An event.
Just rare.
Exactly.
Especially for D.C.
Exactly. And truly bizarre. But, summer storms. These happen. Anyway, that is very much regional weather. But for those of our D.C. listeners, hopefully you can feel where I'm coming from. In COVID news, let's get to the headlines. There are about 16,517 new COVID cases reported in the United States yesterday, with about 296 new deaths. Over the past week, there have been an average of about 12,809 cases per day. That's an increase of 5% from the average 2 weeks earlier. That's right, increase. We've been weeks, really months of decrease, often double-digit decreases pretty continuously here, and now it is going back up, the numbers and I'm seeing this chalked up to the spread, the prevalence of the Delta variant, which is, supposed to be more transmissible, more infectious, that kind of thing. Anyway, this comes as 47% of the total American public has been fully vaccinated, and 55% of residents have received at least one dose of a COVID vaccine. As of this morning, to give you the total stats, the coronavirus has infected about 33,656,144 people across the United States and killed 604,756 people. The organizers of the Tokyo Olympics say they could still ban all spectators. This is a move they've been warning about for a while. Of course, Tokyo is concerned about the spread of COVID. The Olympics draw quite a few people. Just a note to come back to. We'll be talking about the Olympics soon. Our producer, Austin, had a fascinating conversation with him. And anyway, Austin, hope you had a great time in Las Vegas. We'll be talking more about that later. Moving on with the headlines here. In national news, the U.S. Attorney General has put a moratorium on federal executions pending a review of the death penalty by the Justice Department. This follows the brief resumption of the use of the death penalty by Trump's AG, William Barr, last year. He ended a 17-year hiatus on the practice. Now Merrick Garland has reversed that move and has put that moratorium back in place. The House yesterday passed a 5-year, $715 billion infrastructure bill. Authorizes a 50% spending increase. I think that for, just to give you the vote to, 221 to 201, $343 billion to roads, bridges, safety, $109 billion for transit, $168 billion in funds for wastewater and drinking water. Also includes a new program to forgive the unpaid water bills of Americans struggling through the pandemic. So physical infrastructure. This was the slightly, largely gutted physical infrastructure component of the infrastructure bill. Yeah. In my opinion, at least they got it out. It's not like a feather in their cap. It's not a positive thing, but technically it's a positive thing. At least they got it out.
Well, and keep in mind, this is the House.
Yeah, it's true.
It's the House.
It is true.
So it's not even like the House is putting this bill out.
But this seems like the kind of thing that could
pass.
That could totally pass.
No.
You don't think so?
I don't think so. And in fact, if you read into it, they even make the point of saying how they pay for it, they'll deal with that later. Meaning they're not even paying. Republicans made the point of saying, hey, we don't want to raise taxes, blah, blah, blah. And Biden says, okay, we're not going to raise taxes on anybody under $400,000. Fair enough. Don't raise taxes on anybody that's poor or middle class. Great. But then Republicans say, okay, well, we'll increase gas tax. And it's like, well, wait a minute, that's a regressive tax. That's going to hit pretty much the dirt. Meaning, if my mom, who wasn't making $15 an hour, now has to pay higher taxes for some kind of environmental policy, that's a wash. That what calls the Yellow Vest movement in France. Literally, what started the Yellow Vest movement in France. So it's a non-starter. It's a nonsense proposal. And so it's like, okay, so now he is going to have to somehow, the House is going to say, okay, this is our plan. And the Senate is going to say, we don't like the fact that you're putting that much emphasis in environmental stuff. And you guys are trying to blah, 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 blah. And now this infrastructure plan, what is Biden going to do? Is Biden going to make a choice? And not just make a choice, it's a modest plan, meaning the fight ends up on this kind of modest proposal. 600,000 people died. And I don't understand why they hate Americans so. I don't get it. Like if you had a kid, and I'm not saying they're your parents or anything else, but if you had a kid, if you had a responsibility associated with that kid, the idea that you would say, I don't want my kid in good shoes. I don't want my kid having good things.
Wait, Jamarl.
It's stupid.
Let's come back to this.
Let's come back to it. I'm sorry. It's an aggravating thing, but yes, at least they passed something. But again, that's the House, and that
it's
doesn't.
It's not like
it's a fight.
It's not like it's on Biden's desk and he's signing it right now or whatever. I get you. It just seems more accessible. It seems like the kind of thing that's a lot closer. It's like how you're going to pay for it aside, which is like the primary thing that they're. Is how much money they're having to spend on this and exactly how they're going to get that money. Putting that aside for a second, it seems like exactly the kind of thing Republicans would sign up for. That's my point. Anyway, but we'll come back to it. I just wanted to put that in. We'll come back. The House on Wednesday voted to create a committee to review the events of January 6th. What's railing feathers among some on the right is that Liz Cheney is on that committee. She apparently had not reported that she was going to be on that committee to Kevin McCarthy, who had said basically any Republican who joined that committee would be stripped by the Republicans of their current committee assignments. And but she was already on her way out. We'll be talking about that more throughout the show, though. Coming back to that. The Trump Organization has officially been charged with running an employee tax scheme for 15 years. Donald Trump's chief financial officer, Alan Weisselberg, faced charges of grand larceny and tax fraud, as well as avoiding $1.7 million in perks that should have been reported as income. Mr. Trump was not charged, and no other executive in the company has been touted for wrongdoing. In international news, the last United States troops have left the largest base in Afghanistan, the Bagram Air Base. On Thursday, American Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin spoke with his Afghani counterpart, telling him that the United States is invested in the quote-unquote security and stability of Afghanistan as it withdraws its troops. The Taliban is reportedly satisfied and elated about this move. They basically said that. They basically said, we're happy to see the Americans going as they would be. And what they're saying, we'll come back to this too, what they're saying is, with American influence out of the play, the people of Afghanistan can have their say and peacefully come to their own, new conclusion. I'm guessing there's going to be some violent conflict between the Afghani government and the Taliban to determine who's actually has their hands on the reins, has their hands on the steering wheel.
What's the date? July 2nd?
Yeah.
Mark my words. There's no peace to be found in Afghanistan going forward. I swear to God, there's not.
I know. That's the screwed up part about all this stuff, of course. Anyway, Israel is carrying out an air raid on Gaza following the launching of incendiary balloons by Gazan militants. Israel said they are targeting a weapons manufacturing site. The UN's World Food Program says it has resumed work in Tigray. This follows the withdrawal of Ethiopian government troops from the regional capital of Tigray, that's Mekelle. Officials with the program said entrance to the territory was still difficult, however. But again, this has been many months now, of this specific UN World Food Program and other sort of UN human rights orgs and just NGOs in general, talking about how they can't get into Tigray, this northern part of Ethiopia. And the Ethiopian government just got pushed out, and all of a sudden they're able to get in. Just interesting. We've talked with Teddy about the long-standing relationship between the TPLF, the former government, and international institutions.
Yes,
we assume those would continue, and it's just interesting to watch from overseas.
And not even just continue, just even in the standpoint of those people know other people in power. It's that, right? It's like, so you get a call from, I don't know, Hussein, whatever. I don't want to say anything racist from saying whatever name. But you get my point. You take that call. And in taking that call, okay, is there a relationship between you that extended prior? Well, the answer is, of course, yes. Does Abiy Ahmed have those relationships? Well, the answer, of course, is no. It's that stuff that comes into play. And so, I don't know. I mean, it seems like it's friendships that are...
You'd think Abiy could hit up the Norwegians with the whole Nobel Peace Prize thing. Maybe they're going to be on his side.
Well, I mean, that's assuming that Abiy Ahmed was wrong. I mean, what if he's not? Like, what if they were going to attack him? Meaning, what if the original premise of this was, we're going to be attacked, they're going to try to take power. Hence, I need to respond.
Oh, you mean last year?
Yeah.
Yeah, but that's what it was. The TPLF was striking them.
That's kind of my point. Like, so it's like, can you take the Nobel Peace Prize if the guy did something to defend himself? It's that stuff. But then it's like, well, but what when the guy goes too far?
Oh, yeah, what's the Peace Prize about?
Yeah, right.
And here's the problem, as far as I can tell. It's being claimed that the Ethiopian government is working with the Eritreans, and the Eritreans are largely the ones who are going too far. I've heard that there's some reports that like Ethiopian militants themselves are going too far, but most of it seems to have to do with Eritrea. I'm not sure what that has to do with. Maybe that's
either
wrong.
way. These guys are working together, and if there's ethnic cleansing, that's not necessarily great.
No.
And from the standpoint,
wait, say that again for a second, Jamarl. If there's ethnic cleansing, that's not necessarily great.
That's not great.
Just
that's
say
not
a
great.
couple times.
I'll stand by that statement, Shane.
Yeah, controversial.
I'll stand by that
Planting your
statement.
flag.
But you know my point. Like
Yes.
it seems. Look, war is a messy business, and when Theodore was here. And we kind of had this conversation about, oh, you weren't here when it was, okay.
No, sorry.
So he kind of made this point of like, look, I said I would stand by these guys until they went too far.
Yeah.
And now it looks like they're going too far. That was the way he took it. And we got into this back and forth over internet. Because he was like, well, they shut the internet down. I said, well, they shut the internet down because they're at war, Teddy. It's a civil war at that point. He says, yeah, but all of those people, I mean, you can win the hearts and minds by turning it over. I said, they don't care about the hearts and minds. The priority is to prevent or to screw up the communication of your adversary. And you're in a hostile territory that does not want you to be there. You're not going to just say, hey, let's turn it all on. He says, war's a messy business. Yes. Meaning the goal of it wasn't to attack the public in this kind of mass punishment. The goal was to destroy communication,
yes.
to make it difficult for your enemy to communicate with one another. That has larger consequences to the rest of the population, but those consequences matter less than disrupting your enemy's communication. It's that stuff.
Now, does that count as total war? This is the kind of modern thing.
That's not even total.
No, that's not. Well, of course, that's not total.
That's just, I need to disrupt my enemy's communications.
That is significantly impacting the state of civilian life in the same way that bombing, not to the same degree, but in the same way broadly that bombing would have impacted civilians. Of course, you can get your leg blown off, a building come down on you with a bomb. Same thing's not going to happen with the internet ceasing to work. But vital services probably stop functioning.
Electricity.
And your ability to get help if you're in dire medical need.
Clean water.
And that's what you were dependent on, that kind of thing. There are just all these different things that tie into it. My point is, it gets totalized because it starts to impact the civilians more than it impacts the military.
Yeah.
Which is, I think, where you start to push the line over between sort of collateral damage into scorched earth, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
Which is what makes this controversial. Anyway, a couple more headlines I want to hit real quick. Iraq has been hit by a widespread power outage that was reportedly caused by the failure of a key power line in the country. This comes at a time when temperatures across the country are at extreme highs. I checked Baghdad, Iraq's temperature this morning. It was 114 degrees Fahrenheit, which is pretty warm. That's not the 120s, which is where people very quickly start dying in large numbers without access to AC.
You'll some of those people dying working or something like that?
And people will still die with it at 115. To be extremely clear, it's just it gets significantly worse as the temperature goes up. Because how do you cool down?
That's intense. I was in Aswan when I was traveling, and they kept telling me in Cairo that was 100 degrees every day. Dude, it's hot in Aswan. And there's no way to really frame that. Because, what do you mean it's hot in Aswan? It's 100 degrees here. What are you talking about?
That's not even that hot. That's
hot. It was hot in Aswan.
Yeah.
I've never been in that much heat. And I don't know what that temperature, it was over 100, easy, but oppressive. Yes. Oppressive heat, where it's just moving hurts. And so people just don't move. They try to find a place to stay in a room, stay in an air-conditioned place, and just kind of lay out. I think I stayed in a hotel for most of that day because you couldn't function.
It's true.
That hot. It's really extreme.
It's true.
So the idea that we're hitting temperatures like that's insane.
And their AC is out. And why is their AC out? Their key power line is down. I can't, I don't want to make too much. It's not about the United States, anything like that. But we fit ourselves in. I get it, but here's where I come to it. Why is that key power line down? Well, there's an ongoing, big military conflict in Iraq. Turkey's involved in it. You have rebels in the north. You have the Iraqi government. They're all fighting. The ability of the government to provide for basic infrastructure services like maintaining power lines is down. Point is, instability in the region helps to contribute to this problem. Helps to aggravate it, which
1000%.
is definitely a bad thing. And on the heat, I'm biased here. I spent a bunch of years growing up in LA. I've spent time east of there numerous times, and you get inland in California and it gets hot. LA, it's 90 degrees. That's okay, that's a pretty warm day, maybe 100. You get inland, it'd be 50, 60, 70 miles. it's like 115.
Oh, wow.
120.
It just
so last
spikes.
last year.
But it's desert territory.
Early
You're talking about
pandemic.
like Death
Yeah, I'm
Valley
talking
and stuff
desert
like that.
territory, that kind of thing. It just gets extreme. Now, it is a super dry heat, which is exactly the right kind, but it's bad. Anyway, one last very quick headline. The former deputy leader of Golden Dawn, that's a Greek neo-Nazi party, has been taken to prison following 9 months in hiding. Just long enough for somebody to give birth. Just going to point out 9 months. I'm not saying he has a secret mistress that but maybe he just lines it up. Anyway, you guys are listening to Fault Lines. Those are our headlines. Fault Lines with Thomas and Stranahan. And we're at about the time for our break. I'm going to take us into it. We're going to be coming back with our soapbox segment, Jamarl's monologue, our short back and forth. You're listening to Fault Lines with Thomas and Stranahan. We'll be right back on the other side of this short break.
Fault Lines.
What do we want?
News, politics, and culture.
When do we want it?
Wait, we weren't finished. News, politics, and culture without the red and blue spin.
Okay, so now when do you want it?
Daily from noon to 2 p.m. Eastern Time.
Okay, satisfied now?
Never. Tune into Political Misfits on 105.5 FM in Washington, D.C. and on 102.9 and 104.7 FM in Kansas City, Missouri. Daily for our analytical fix. No surrender.
Fault Lines.
Welcome back to Fault Lines on Radio Sputnik. My name is Jamarl Thomas. I'm joined with my co-host Shane Stranahan, coming to you live out of our station in Washington, D.C. If you guys live in the area, you can catch us on radio at 105.5 FM and 1390 AM. We're also in Kansas City at 102.9 FM and 104.7 FM. If you guys are digging what Shane and I are putting down, whatever platform you're consuming this content on, give us a like and share that audio or video. If you want to join in on the conversation, you can do so with a chat, a tweet, and of course, you can reach us by phone at 202-521-1320. That is 202-521-1320. Your engagement helps make this show what it is, so definitely don't be shy. I hate mornings like this. I like mornings when I have a very clear idea of what I want to talk about. When there's like not a division of ideas, where you have this just, all right, this is exactly what I want. I feel this way about it. I feel strongly about it. Bam, there it is. But this morning, there are multiple things. There's this notion of what I call a shot across the bow for Trump, and I would say it's more than a shot across the bow. I would say Donald Trump is screwed this morning. And honestly, if he is sitting in a room somewhere when his money man, Alan Weisselberg, got caught, I would imagine he had a deep sigh. It's not about whether or not Trump is guilty or not. It's not even about, believe it or not, whether or not it's selective. It is selective, but he is probably also guilty. Both of those things just so happen to be true, which is the reason why I say when his money brand got caught, it probably was a deep sigh. I mean, some of the stuff that they're asserting is either true or false. And if it's true, it's problematic. This is the New York Times. The Manhattan District Attorney's Office, which has been conducting an investigation alongside the New York Attorney General, also accused top executive Alan Weisselberg of avoiding taxes on $1.7 million in perks that should have been reported as income. Mr. Weisselberg, Mr. Trump's long-serving, trusted chief financial advisor or officer, faced grand larceny, tax fraud, and other charges. Quote, to put it bluntly, this was a sweeping and audacious illegal payment scheme, unquote. Carrie Doon, general counsel for Manhattan District Attorney Cyrus Vance Jr., said at the arraignment in Manhattan. Now, here's the part. Mr. Doon and the indictment described as a deliberate effort by senior executives to underreport their income in concert with the Trump organization by attempting or by accepting secret perks that did not show up on tax documents. In the case of Mr. Weisselberg, the indictment said the company kept the benefits off the books but recorded an internal spreadsheet. Oh, right there. That's the part that sticks. Internal spreadsheets, separate books? Why would they need to keep separate books? Why is there two sets of books? Who keeps two sets of books? If the first set of books is correct, why do you need the second? And if we're having this conversation about tax fraud and larceny and all this stuff, and then you find a separate set of books, oh man. I don't know if Lance is married, but his wife probably had a great night that night because he probably was very happy and very excited once that took place. Because what I know and what he knows is if I want to get my hands on Trump, I need leverage. And apparently they have been trying to leverage Weisselberg over the course of the year during the time they were investigating Trump. And no, this is that about Trump. Like, there's no indictment to Trump, and it's conspicuously not to Trump. Trump's name is on that organization, and Weisselberg is his money man. And whether the indictment is about Trump or not, it is very clear that Democrats can't stand Trump. If they can find any way to get his hands on him, they would get their hands on him. And in this very specific case, you had the luxury that Trump may likely be guilty of something that a lot of people are guilty of. It's kind of like the speeding analogy. I think Ted Rall uses. You get, 50 people speeding. Nobody's going 60 miles an hour. 60 miles an hour, what's that? But you pull out that guy in a red car for whatever particular reason, and you stop that guy. And that guy looks up and says, why did you stop me? All of these other people. You were breaking the law. I know, but all of these other people. The catch here is the cop picked and choose. But the cop had the option of picking and choosing because the guy actually did break the law. But it's a law that everybody broke. So is it selective? Yes, it's selective. Does it mean that he's not guilty? No. It also could mean that he is very well guilty. And I guess the point here is if there's a separate set of books as Donald Trump in any of that separate spreadsheet, that's the money man. And not just the money man. What does the money man know? There's a point, or there's a quote here where Donald Trump makes the point of saying that this guy basically knows how to, fight for the bottom line. Yeah, right here. Whom Trump once praised as doing whatever was necessary to protect the bottom line. That's not a great quote, Trump. That's not a great quote. That's not a great quote. Especially when your money man has been indicted. So the catch becomes what happens now. If you are Lance or if you're Latita and you say to yourself, Donald Trump is talking about running for office. Donald Trump is not going to be able to run for office if Donald Trump is in a cage. Donald Trump needs to know that. And so we need to build a case against Trump on something that most likely Trump did do since Trump was in New York, and we know how New York works. And they crawl their way from one person to the next, and then they get their hands on Weisselberg, and they grab him, and they scream, and they put him in the cage. We're going to put you in jail for 10 years, 20 years. Do you believe that Donald Trump would back you up? Did he back up Cohen? What did he do with Cohen? He left Cohen drop. And why do you believe if the situation was reversed when he was president, he would do the same thing with you? 20 years. You're 73 years old. 73 years old. You want to see your grandkids. I don't even know if I said grandkids, but that's still coming. You want to see your grandkids. I don't have any grandkids, and you never will. It was going to be that stuff. And he's going to be in a room, and there's going to be a light, and there's going to be a dark room, and the light just going to be flying back and forth, and there's going to be a guy, New York cop, just like on Law and Order, screaming at him. Squeal, squeal, talk, talk. And what Donald Trump knows is whether he goes to prison or not is dependent upon a 73-year-old's sense of loyalty compared against that 73-year-old sense of being put in a cage for a decade. That is not a great place to be, Shane. And if I was Donald Trump, I would not be, I don't know. I mean, because you can look at this in two ways. Hey, you want to run again? Fine. Run from a cage. Think we're joking. I don't think they're joking. I think they're dead serious. I don't think Trump gets the protections of the other presidents. Meaning, because what Trump's full power was, it wasn't in a presidential thing. Meaning it wasn't the presidential purview. So it's a presidential purview of the U.S. to knock over a government. No thoughts. There's no political thing, political consequence, or anything else. Insofar as it doesn't affect America. If it affects America, there's consequences. If it doesn't, no. It's okay with killing a particular leader, a world leader. We've done that in the past, trying to knock it over military leaders and everything else in the South. And it is even okay to start wars. However, you can't turn around and say the election is fraudulent, or you can't turn around and scare the political system so much that there's so much hysteria that mainstream Republicans don't like you and don't like your people because they're terrified of your groups. Have you ever heard the Republicans talk about Trump supporters? Like they're saying they give Trump support on some level because they believe A, they'll lose, and B, that they're scared of the supporters. It's both. And so it's like from their standpoint, they don't like him being in this political process because it screws up what they consider to be normal in the political process. They would never say that, though. So you would get the Lindsey Grahams of the world and all of these other people falling in line and everything else. My point is, he has scared and spooked the political system to such a degree that the typical rules and the protections of presidents don't apply. They will lock him up, and Democrats would not care about the consequences. And they would take this arrogant stance of, he committed a crime, he's going to jail. That's all there is. This wasn't political, blah, 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 blah. And they would be lying through their teeth. Yes, he committed a crime, but yes, it was also political. That's what I thought. I don't think he's going to get that same air of, oh, we can't lock up a president. I don't think that's going to be applied to Trump.
I don't think it's going to be a good move. If you look at this as like a sort of embedded strategic obligation of the Democratic crowd, not as a direct order from somebody inside the DNC, but like the kind of thing Democrats will do. Group thinking, political prosecution, trying to push people out that they oppose. This is our in group, that's the out group, that kind of thing.
I mean, just to be fair though, Republicans did impeach Bill Clinton. So it's not just Democrats. It's just recently it's been Democrats doing this nonsense.
Oh yeah, and that's what we're talking about right here. That's what I was bringing up. My point is, it's not like there's a top down, you do this, you do that conspiracy to like, okay, we're going to go after him. There's sure some of that, I bet, when you get into the halls of the FBI and the DOJ and some of the stuff that was going on. I'm sure it's still going on, but like just broadly, there's just people respond to it in different ways. Is my point. And so Cyrus Vance Jr., Letitia James, probably some communication on the back end, but they're also doing this because Trump is a big scalp, like we were talking about, and we've been talking about with this case for a long time. The thing is, what does this actually do? Where does this lead for them? Does this work in any way? If they get Trump, not just on charges, but in prison, the Trump base that Republicans are scared of or whatever, what does that turn into? Who are they going to vote for? It's not going to be Trump. And the assumption is it's going to be somebody who's more Trumpian than Trump, who will have taken Trumpiness to the Trumpianness degree or whatever, to the nth degree. I'm being hyperbolic. Who's simply stepping further in that direction because they see that there is a need for it, that a lot of people want that kind of thing in American politics, that Trump not only like put forward his own charismatic personality, but was also, of course, responding to a lot of people, like what they wanted, what they needed, and not just from his temperament, but like policies focusing on manufacturing, stopping the wars overseas, sort of a more honest and direct feeling political language broadly. All these things. My point is, if they succeed, which I frankly don't think they're going to, it's not going to work. Now, if they don't succeed in getting Trump in prison, behind bars, whatever, disqualified from becoming presidents again, he is going to use this, I think successfully, very successfully, to double down. Because it's just the continuation of that same damn narrative, and it didn't work back then. The only thing that really damned Trump in this last election, I think, was COVID. It wasn't any of the follow-on of the Russiagate stuff.
I think it was COVID. Yeah, I think it was COVID. I mean, Trump, I was having a conversation with he's a doctor. I hate this notion of my doctor, because my doctor comes across as somewhat of authoritative in a particular way, and I don't consider, it's like my barber, but I never consider my barber authoritative. He just gives me point of view of advice. But we were having this conversation about why people voted for Trump. And I was trying to make the point to him. He was like, well, I think people were, I don't think he said racist, but I think he said white people want the system to stay or something like that. And I said, but that doesn't expand how Trump increased his numbers with African-Americans, Hispanics, et cetera. And I said, do you realize that 42% of this country only made $18,000 a year? And it's like, you are working and you are not making ends meet. And it's not like you're not making ends meet because you're being lazy and all that nonsense. You're just not making ends meet. You're the way your world is like arranged in some way. People recognize this isn't right. And whether they recognize it wasn't right or not, they still felt the pressure of that system over and over again. Like the jobs thing. I was trying to point to them like they're screaming that, oh, we are out of, our employees or something like that. And it's like, no, those people found a minor space cushion, like a moment of space where they said, okay, I don't want to go back to being dirt poor, not making enough to live off while working an entire day. So yeah, I'm going to take a moment for that. And then the world, society freaked out. Oh, we can't find enough workers. No, you can't find enough workers to work at a starvation pittance wage. It's that. The point I was trying to make to him is, if that's your world, why wouldn't your world choose something else? Even if that something else is Trump. And he's like, he's shocked by the whole thing. And I'm like, why are you shocked by the whole thing? I said, is it because you're a doctor? You're just kind of, like, you don't see it. You don't touch it. But it was that, where it's like there's a repudiation of a system that just doesn't seem to work. When you have 50% of your population that's basically poor, something's wrong. Something's wrong. And so it's like you have these pragmatic Democrats who come out and say, okay, I'm the pragmatic choice. I'm the pragmatic choice. There's no way you can vote for that guy. And they said, yes, we can. Yes, we can. Yes, we can. That's Obama's phrase, right?
Yeah.
That's what they said with Trump. Yes, we can. And either they just did not show up, or in some cases they voted for Trump. And in this election, Trump increased his margins with those demographics. And so it's like, you guys are doing something wrong. Democrats held the House for 50 years. Did you know that? Maybe with like 2 hiccups. They had the House for 50 years. It wasn't even thought Republicans would never take the House. How could they ever take the House? Democrats have had it for 50 years. Not now. Why? That needs to be interrogated. And it needs to be interrogated in real terms of like, okay, what do we lose? Is it possible that we lost connection with the public? Well, the public now thinks that we're a corporate party, because that is true. That is exactly what the public thinks. And so it's like, and yet there's no change. And that's why this bill aggravates me so much. The infrastructure bill. It's like, you already had a situation where people voted for Trump, which is basically a repudiation of what politics was prior. And instead of using that, you guys went into hysteria, screamed that you impeached the guy twice. The second time, yes. The first time was nonsense. Screamed that the guy got over the finish line with Russia, meaning never accepting the election results. And then never engaged why the public put him in office in the first place. Meaning you never engaged why you lost, why your political system failed, to the point where you would end up with somebody like Trump. And even now, their response is, let's just put him in a cage. And Joe Biden ends up with an infrastructure bill. 600,000 people died. And still it's, okay, we're still going to give America the short end of the stick. It's just, I get why people are angry. And I think what happens is it doesn't flow in these kind of logical ways that a rational person would think, like, well, people would just get up and they would protest. And they would protest specifically about this. I don't think it works that way. I think what you get is January 6th. I think what you get is a year of protests where people are angry, pissed off, and it's not coming out in the very specific ways because people don't understand it in those specific ways because they're in their own little bubbles. I think it's that. So,
well, and there's also the fact that the resistance, there was this pushback from like the establishment left for years that was trying to invalidate Trump's presidency. And
I don't want to call that the left. I don't know, the woke left, maybe. I mean, it's just,
well, but
I mean, like for are the P-head wearers the left?
Are the P-hat wearers, you said?
Yeah, like after Trump got elected and they put on the P-hats. Can we say P-hats? Can we say that?
Yes, you can't say I don't think
Can't
we can say the more. Yeah.
Vaginal hats. Vaginal hats.
I think that works. I think we can say vaginal hats.
Were those people the left? Because I would say no. I would say they were Democrats.
Well, at that point, it's just in group out group stuff. That's not for me to. I'll put that aside.
Does it make sense? Like I guess like it's this notion of what's
my point is Boogaloo Boys or whatever, really Proud Boys, I think is what we're talking about, and just this like group, informal association of right-wing militias that seem to have risen up and been put under the spotlight and a microscope maybe in the national media. There's like they saw the resistance doing their thing. Now, two things here before we close. We have Peter Oliver on the line. We're going to be changing subjects quite dramatically. But one, the resistance is far less dangerous than the whole Proud Boys thing, in my opinion. Far less literally physically dangerous, but they're far, far, far more irritating.
Yes.
They're far more irritating. The Proud Boys, the Boogaloo Boys, I don't like some of the things they say, but they don't really like bug me in a deep way. Whereas the resistance, again, this is maybe too
It's hard to
personal.
explain. It's the difference between physical violence versus being annoyed.
Yeah. But
the resistance is annoying.
Because, I don't know, there's this resistance, like self-righteous, kind of like
That's aggravating. Very aggravating.
Energy. Yeah. And it's
the Tucker Carlson scowl, but in practice, if that makes sense. Like Carlson scowl, he's just looking at you and it's this look like,
yes,
what does this guy think? Like, is he annoyed at me? Is he disbelieving me?
A little bit disgusted.
A little bit disgusted with me. It's like all of that in one facial expression,
it's
right?
I was making fun of it, but it's like a very potent facial expression.
It really is.
For a news host. But I hear what you're saying, and it's kind of that writ large, that like disbelief and disgust and dismay at whatever America they see or something at most people, I think, and anybody who voted for Trump, and then a complete abject refusal to have a conversation about the grounds on which people voted for Trump.
Because in their heads, it's like, that's the highest. It's like, you hated black people. It's like, what are you talking about? How do you know why I do that? How do you know?
How'd you get there?
Yeah, how did you get there? How do you know why I got there? And do you even care how I got there? It doesn't matter.
It's such a delightful tactic, because what is, if you were to say that to me, what is my response going to be? All of a sudden, you've put me on the defensive.
Yeah.
I'm not saying you
but you get very annoyed by the prospect.
If you do the offense thing constantly, that's usually the way to win. You don't just constantly defend yourself. You constantly attack the opponent. That seems to be the tactic in rhetoric and politics these days, and they have it down as far as I can tell.
Well, if you're trying to tell somebody that the virtue of your vote alone, meaning, I don't know how because you have to explain, why did you get more blacks and Hispanics in the second election? Yeah. You have to explain that. That needs to be, you have to put that under a microscope. You can't just blow that off as, oh, they're just racist. And no, that's not the case. I mean, if Trump got, or if Biden got the level of Hispanic vote that Sanders got, he would have taken Texas. Like, to put it in perspective, I mean, like, some of that stuff is extreme. The idea that Texas could go to a Democrat at all, but the fact that he lost it because he couldn't get the person of color vote is amazing. And they need, like, that's embarrassing on some level to be a Democrat and not be able to pull people of color. That's supposed to be your bag.
I hear you.
What are you doing, dog?
Let's go to our break.
Absolutely.
Let's go to our break so we can come back with Peter Oliver. We are going to be talking about a little travel imbroglio spat thing between the Brits and Germany, and I think between the Brits and the EU in general.
EU, yeah.
But we'll be talking about that with Peter. We're also going to be talking about, I believe it's pronounced Janez Janša, the Slovenian prime minister who has taken over as the president. It's one of the 4 presidents of Europe. We'll be talking about that rotating position, what that, who he is, how that all affects Slovenia, and sort of the structure of this stuff for a largely American audience. You're listening to Fault Lines with Thomas and Stranahan, coming back from our break with Peter Oliver. We'll be back in a minute.
Fault Lines.
You're listening to Radio Sputnik.
Are you bored? Are you lonely? Do you need a hug? Well, we can't give you that, but we can keep you up to date on Radio Sputnik.
Fault Lines.
Welcome back to Fault Lines on Radio Sputnik. My name is Jamarl Thomas. I'm joined with my co-host Shane Stranahan, coming to you live out of our station in Washington, D.C. We're joined with Peter Oliver to have this conversation about UK and British relationships. And just to nail down, Peter Oliver is our correspondent for RT, and he is a great chap to meet in person. Peter, welcome to the show.
Hello, guys. How are we doing? Jamal, it was lovely to see you in person in Geneva just the other week. Indeed, it was.
Absolutely.
Pleasure to put a face to the name.
Yes.
A face to the voice.
And we got to watch soccer, and I think I was drinking tequila. You were drinking, I think, iced tea. You were a much better person than I was.
On the iced
No,
tea,
man, it was great.
I was busy working.
It was great to meet you. Absolutely great to meet you.
Lovely.
So this issue, Shane and I were joking over the break that it really does put you in the mind of a breakup, like a relationship between the UK and the EU, where one person breaks up and says, I want out of this relationship. And then the other person comes over, or that same person later comes over for sex. And they get told, no, you wanted out of this relationship. This wasn't me that wanted out of this relationship. And now that you wanted out, there are rules and there are certain things that change now that you are out. And that seems to be the position that Britain is in this. I mean, am I wrong on this?
Instead of the in and out with, certain physical activities, we're talking about in and out with travel.
Exactly.
Is what we're talking about.
Exactly, with travel. And in this case, we have, apparently, and I'll just read it. The Times reported on Monday that Merkel, who is preparing to leave her long-held post last year, wanted to ban British visitors from entering the European Union, notwithstanding the vaccination status over concerns about the spread of the Delta variant of the coronavirus in the country. That plan, that would see Britain being designated as a, quote, country of concern, unquote, has not been publicly announced. Now,
right.
Now, that doesn't sound great. I mean, like, if you are the UK and you were part of the European Union and you guys had this relationship and everything else, and now, okay, you're no longer part of us. And immediately things start coming into play. And in this case, a travel ban, but the travel ban for the Delta variant.
Well, the reason they've done this is because of the Delta variant, as you just said there. The UK currently has around 20,000 cases a day of COVID-19. Most of those are the Delta variant. Put that into context, here in Germany, you're looking between 300 and 500 cases per day. Angela Merkel absolutely terrified about the Delta variant spreading here in Germany. This travel ban, which is really pretty much basically Germany has temporarily blocked almost all travel from the UK to Germany, and has put a lot of pressure on other EU nations to do likewise. In fact, I'm actually speaking to you right now from the airport in Berlin, and I'm flying to Greece on holiday. The reason I'm flying to Greece on holiday and not where I was supposed to be going, which was to meet my parents in the Netherlands, is because my parents can't come to the EU.
Wow.
Because of the way this has happened, because they would have to quarantine for 14 days, and we were only supposed to meet for a week. So we've put that off until another date. And
what has been the reaction in the UK? I haven't seen the media on this, but I would imagine outright hysteria.
Well, they're not happy. You don't mess with somebody's holidays in Europe. That's definitely one thing. And, there is a major football tournament going on at the moment. England play tomorrow in Rome. against Ukraine in the quarterfinals of the Euros. There'll be no traveling England fans going to that game, because if they were to travel, they've already exceeded they don't have enough time to travel and quarantine after the game in which they got through. So there's a lot of people unhappy about that. It's the thing is this is just one of many things that will continue to pop up post-Brexit, because inside the European Union there is obviously all kinds of problems and all kinds of arguments, but there is cohesion in terms of how the 27 act as one, particularly when it comes to issues of travel. So I'm in Germany, I can quite easily fly to Greece, just I have to fill in a form online, not a problem. Because the UK has opted to be outside of that infrastructure now, well, it makes things a whole lot more difficult. Now, Angela Merkel is actually just speaking right now in London alongside Prime Minister Boris Johnson. She's on her state visit to the UK. It's expected that they'll be talking more about travel between the two countries. They'll come to some agreement. The fact that almost 37% of the cases of COVID-19 in Germany right now are of the Delta variant, well, they're basically saying we'll rather control it through vaccination and through track and trace, as opposed to just outright banning people coming from the UK. So
that's wise enough, but
some kind of.
But you said I wanted to pause on that for a second. If Germany, you said 300 to 500 new cases per day, somewhere in that range, sub 1,000, right? That's the number you gave.
Yeah.
And in the UK, 20,000 approximately a day.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, that's higher than the U.S. in absolute numbers.
Yeah.
I mean, the U.S. is we give the numbers every morning.
The UK has a higher rate. The UK has a higher rate than the whole of the EU put together.
Yeah, there you go. Per capita. Yeah, and it's quite a bit higher than where we are in the States on a per capita basis. Quite a bit, but it just in absolute numbers. Again, there's 66 something million as a population of the UK. Yeah. A smaller population than Germany. So even if they have similar ratios of the sort of prevalence of the Delta variant, in other words, even if the UK has a third of people have the Delta variant, in Germany a third of people have the Delta variant, say that's the case. If the UK has like 20 to 30 times the number of new daily infections, that's still not quite enough for Germany to open up, don't you think? What's your take on that? Where do you think that's going to land?
These aren't per capita numbers, I'm telling you, Shane. These are real. These are the brass tacks final bottom line numbers, and they're still higher in the UK than they are across the whole of the EU. So they are. There is big questions being asked about it. Ultimately, what it's coming down to is the UK is going to have to make sure that it contacts those people properly who have been found out to have been infected, that they aren't the ones doing any traveling, but the people who aren't infected, well, you're facing a lot of pressure on Germany. When Angela Merkel was calling for this at the beginning of the week, there was huge pressure on her from Malta, from Italy, from Spain, from Portugal as well. And Greece, to say, no, you don't realize this is the vast lion's share of our economy you're talking about, us missing out on it for another year. We don't get those British tourists coming in and spending that money. That's a huge chunk of our yearly income. So there will be some give and take. And unfortunately, fortunately for those people who want to go on holiday, it does seem like they will be able to do that later in the summer. But there is a problem in the United Kingdom when it comes to the rate of how this virus or this variant has spread, and it's certainly one that they have not got on top of yet, and that would be a big issue for Angela Merkel to be speaking to. But in terms of this ban and how it's being perceived, we've also heard from Tony Blair. Remember him? He's been speaking about this, as he seems to be speaking about a lot of things of late. There are some that are suggesting he's even thinking about making a comeback. Blair has been saying that this type of ban makes no sense, and he called on Boris Johnson to heavily counter any German proposal to ban this. Opening up international travel would benefit both the UK and German nationals. Now, they're putting all of the pressure, all of the onus, I beg your pardon, on vaccination and vaccination rates, which of course the UK is very high. It's been surpassed by Germany when it comes to vaccination rates. Just recently, they went on a huge push here in order to get people jabbed, and that seems to have worked. But what we're not seeing in the UK is what we did see here, which was the number of daily infections going down.
Peter, you know what? One quick question before I pivot here. We were talking, I believe it was yesterday in Thailand, the island of Phuket.
Careful with that one.
Exactly. I'm like, okay, let me check my pronunciation here real quick. But they're reopening the island of Phuket. as a tourist destination, basically.
Yeah.
And it is an island, and it's sort of a little sandbox experiment thing that they're trying out. We'll bring people in, no need for quarantine, just stay on this island, and they're going to be sort of monitoring the situation. And then it's an island. Ideally, if the caseload gets too high, if there's too much circulation, that kind of thing, they're just going to shut it down. That's something they're working on. Now, you're headed to Crete, like Greece, you said generally.
Yeah.
But
I'm going to Crete, yeah.
But pardon me for getting that away. But talking specific locations, is there any talk about that kind of plan, like specific special economic zones in China, for instance, like a special tourist zone that is exempt from a lot of these restrictions? Anything like that, Peter?
They did that first off. We're a little beyond that stage now. Initially, I'm thinking more about the Balearic Islands in Spain, where it was Mallorca, Minorca, and Ibiza. They were first to open up because they could do exactly what you were just saying there. Also, the Madeira Island from Portugal, they were similarly a tourist resort, a tourist destination. People were able to open up sooner because they could contain whatever came about. You're not going to have people driving across borders to get there. I mean, I know people do take the ferry very regularly from Barcelona and also from France to the Balearic Islands, but it's a lot less than, say, you open up, I don't know, Bavaria, and you've got tourists coming in from all over the place in order to drive there. So yes, they have done that, but we've moved a bit past that point. I mean, I'm looking for anything wood in order to touch in my superstitious mind here, because Europe is thankfully seeing case numbers drop a little bit, and we are desperately hoping that does stay the way it's going to be.
Good to hear. Okay, let's turn. Thank you for that, Peter. Let's talk about Janez Janša and the rotating presidency of the Council in the EU. I want to set this up. The EU has 4 presidents broadly. Can you one of those presidential positions is a rotating position that changes basically every 6 months. Slovenia has just taken that office. I believe it was Portugal. I believe that it is just left behind. Who are the 4? What is the significance of this position? What are the 4 presidents, and who is Janez Janša? Hope I'm not hitting you with too much there, Peter.
No, we'll start off with who the 4 presidents are. The European Parliamentary President is David Maria Sassoli. He is pretty much the same as the Speaker of the Parliamentary Chamber, where the members of the European Parliament, where they all sit, he basically oversees their daily arguments. Then there's the European Council President. That role is currently held by Charles Michel from Belgium. He works as the representative of the leaders of the 27 member states. They're appointed by those national leaders. He used to be the Prime Minister of Belgium, so he's been in those council meetings many times. You then get elected to the role of overseeing the council meetings. Then there's the big seats. The European Commission President, Ursula von der Leyen, currently has that job. She's the leader of the executive, which is the EU Commission. The executive, they create the laws that the Parliament then votes on, decides if they're going to go through. She's also the person that represents the European Union at the G7. Then you get the presidency of the Council of the EU. Now, this, as you said, is a rotating position. What this job does is you're essentially the host and the organizer of major summits. And, you get a bit of, for all of the different member states, so whether you're Germany or whether you're Ireland or whether you're Luxembourg or you're Estonia, you get to do this job. You get that seat at the top of the big table, or if you're a small country, even like Slovenia as well. But it isn't just a ceremonial role. They work on adopting the annual EU budget along with the European Parliament. They put together the sides in the room when it comes to signing any deals. They make sure that those deals everything's brokered correctly. Now, it is quite an important position, albeit a little ceremonial, as I said. What it does with Slovenia now having that role is it means that Janez Janša, the Prime Minister of Slovenia, is now the President of the European, has the presidency of the Council of the EU. Now, he started things off with a bang because now Mr. Janša is a huge fan of former President Donald Trump. He looked at the way Donald Trump handled things and went, that is the way I want to do it. He calls out anybody he doesn't like on Twitter. He has not been particularly friendly with the press. In fact, he's waged what he calls himself a war with the media. he started off on Thursday doing his best to make some in the EU Commission, including Ursula von der Leyen, feel a little uncomfortable. He has a long, on-running battle with the judiciary in Slovenia. In fact, he accused some of the judges in Slovenia just yesterday of having links with communism and with the Communist Party. And the proof that he showed of this was, well, he showed a picture of a group of judges from Slovenia at a barbecue with two Democrats, Social Democratic MEPs, so MEPs from the Social Democratic Party. Now, Frans Timmermans, who's the Vice President of the European Commission and the most senior, Social Democrat in the Commission, not happy at all. Frans Timmermans, the Dutch representative to the EU Commission, not a shrinking violet at all. He's described saying, I simply can't be at the same podium as Janša. This is an unacceptable attack and defamation of two judges and two Social Democratic MPs. So he started really well. In fact, Ursula von der Leyen had to then follow on the stage afterwards. She was asked, what's going on with this, particularly when it comes to an ongoing dispute where Janša has strongly backed Viktor Orban over LGBTQ laws in Hungary that are widely opposed by most in Western Europe. They're particularly stringent laws. They almost outlaw and make illegal anything to do with promoting LGBTQ lifestyle, or not even promoting it, just displaying anything like a rainbow flag. There was a huge dispute about this at the football just last week when the game was played in Munich. Janša has said it's up to a parent to decide what they teach their children. Ursula von der Leyen, of course, then has to appear on stage and says, yes, it is the right of a parent to educate their children, but we're very clear of what it means to educate a child. And of course, we'll be speaking closely with Mr. Janša more about this. One thing, and then quickly off the stage. One thing that is interesting is they're willing clearly to meet Janša more than halfway when it comes to probably getting him to keep his mouth as shut as possible. I said he has problems with the judges and with the judiciary. He hasn't appointed any prosecutors to the European Public Prosecutor's Office, something that you have to do as Prime Minister to make up so your judiciary is represented at an EU-wide level. He's been refusing to do that, and as part of refusing to do that, his budget money for the next few years was being held back. Now that's being released, and he has not appointed anybody to the European Public Prosecutor's Office, but he has received the first tranche of 2.5 billion euro that he'll be getting.
Why was that released? What's the timing there? Is that him in this position, or when did that happen?
This happened straight away. This happened yesterday.
Really? So yes, it is.
And then this happened straight away.
Yes.
It obviously we could never tell whether both the two are linked, but the two have happened extremely close together.
And where there is smoke, etc.
What they're really hoping for is Janša takes this role as the more ceremonial side of it, as opposed to the
functional,
as opposed to getting involved,
making changes, making decisions about the budget, that kind of thing, like you were talking about. Exactly. That is the hope. Like you're saying, it's funny because Slovenia, a smaller nation,
2.1 million.
What'd you say? 2.1
million people, less than most U.S. cities.
2.1 million people is tiny, and I have a few friends. Ljubljana. This is one of those more notorious names. Ljubljana, the capital of Slovenia. I hear beautiful city, but
yes,
they are
wonderful place.
They're kind of bad boys in the EU right now. It seems based on Janša specifically. Sarah, can they prevent him from doing extra ceremonial activities? In other words, is it just going to be hosting Gaias and balls and committee meetings and everything? Mm-hmm. Or, is he going to be able to sort of exert his authority, and do you think he will, Peter?
No, they can't stop him. Yes, he can. Probably, yes, he will. You've got to remember, this is not a man that's backwards about coming forwards. He was a staunch Marxist back in the day. When the former Yugoslavia collapsed in 1991, he basically jumped right over to the far right. He's 62 years old now. I think it's his third stint as Prime Minister. He's been in prison in the past. He's referred to as a right-wing arsonist. Now that's a difficult one for me to say with my accent, because I could come out as something very different. Anyway, basically, the fear in the EU is that he will use the presidency, use this position to attack not the democratic process, but the bureaucratic process, and that he will use this in a similar way as Donald Trump used public speaking events to attack his personal rivals, and it could all be quite embarrassing.
Exactly. Embarrassing, kind of ignominious. They're like that kind of thing where Trump, like as a big public figure, just doing all this embarrassing stuff. And I hear that Yanis is active on Twitter too. I can see it.
Oh, yeah, very much so.
That's funny. Peter, I want to shift slightly to Germany. Angela Merkel, she's supposed to leave at the end of the year. This is the end of an icon. And it's funny, Shane made this comment talking about receding into history and becoming this kind of thing of history as opposed to just a person.
We're talking about Donald Rumsfeld, who just passed away.
Rumsfeld.
Of course.
Yeah, but it's kind of like that with her on some level. I mean, she's been there for so long. German politics, even EU politics, was basically dominated by Merkel on some level. And now she's basically stepping down.
Yes.
What is taking place now that the boss is about to leave? Now, what I mean by that is... Go for it.
They're trying to keep the continuity as much as possible.
Right there.
Armin Laschet would do just that. There has been a boost for the Green Party, who are also a very different Green Party than you see in other countries in Europe and also in the United States. They're very much a center-right party. They're basically sometimes referred to as the same as the Christian Democratic Union, just they really dig on recycling a lot more. So it looks like those two will form a government together. Yeah, that's pretty much where we're headed at the moment. There is a lot of personal attacks against Annalena Baerbock herself, who's the candidate for the Green Party. She was accused of padding her resume. Then she's been accused of plagiarizing one of her books. And all of these things have taken little tolls on the Greens in the polls. And ultimately, I think I don't think she'll win. She won't become chancellor, but she certainly will be a figure in German politics that we're going to see for probably a good while yet, certainly the next parliamentary session, because her party will be a part of the next government, barring any kind of major switch or change or absolute catastrophe.
Let's go into a counterfactual for a moment. Let's say Angela Merkel didn't step down. Let's say at the end of her term, she says, you know what? I'm feeling great. I've been taking herbs and all sorts of stuff, and I think I'm going to go for another 5 years or whatever. What in the Greens take the position that you're thinking they're going to take? What will take place in German politics? Now, what I'm trying to get at is what does continuity look like, either with Merkel there or Merkel not being there? I'm trying to get this notion of the margin of difference between her presence in German politics with, let's say, this kind of surgence of the Greens versus her presence without. And what does continuity mean in that context?
Behind the scenes and banging heads together, she will be in immeasurable loss to getting coalition politics to work in Germany. She is the elder statesman, the eldest of elder statesmen in terms of how long she's been in this job. And that will be the big challenge for Armin Laschet. If he can, but he's been around for a long time himself as well. You know, he's not new on the circuit at all. So she's going to be an immeasurable loss behind the scenes. She's going to be an immeasurable loss in terms of a continuity as facing outwards to the world. You think of Germany, you think of Angela Merkel. Now, 16 years is a long time to be in any job, and you know, it's a really long time to be leader of a major country. So,
and she and Laschet are both the same generation. She's just, you know, half a decade older than him. I mean, that counts for me. My point being, they have a familiarity, and there's, in terms of continuity, that kind of provides it. One real quick question before we close, and I know you got to go, and thank you for joining us. Just really briefly.
It's all right. The plane's waiting for me.
Oh, really? Let's let you go then. I'll let you go. You guys have been listening.
When when I turn around, no, I've got one time for one more question.
Okay, 15 seconds. Is she going to remain as a kind of gray eminence, or do you see Merkel truly retiring? Is she going to remain a political figure, even on the outskirts, or is she just going to step out? 15 seconds, Peter.
She's going to retire for a little while. She will take a very, very well-earned holiday, as I understand from reading an interview with her. She will be out of it for a while, and that's what she's saying she's going to do. I think it's almost impossible.
But she's
impossible
probably
to think that she will stay out of it forever. I would say in a couple of years' time, you're going to see her.
We'll probably see her come back. Peter, we've got to close. I don't mean to cut in too hard, but we set a time. Peter Oliver, EU correspondent for RT International. You've been listening to Fault Lines with Thomas and Stranahan. We will be back in a minute with headlines and another 2 hours of this morning show. Be right back.
You're listening to Radio Sputnik. Telling the untold.
Fault lines.
Live from the divided states of America, precipitously perched at the edge of this resilient and exploited globe. Welcome to your context lens for the American perspective. In the left corner, I am your ever vigilant, your indefatigable political analyst, Jamarl Thomas.
And in the independent corner, I am your political analyst, Shane Stranahan.
That would strongly insist that you are listening to Fault Lines with Thomas and Stranahan. We were joking over the break that nobody called Angela Merkel a dictator.
It's true. 16 years in power.
And you know, it's wild. I mean, I love the way Peter talked about it, because he talked about it in these glowing sense of she's an elder statesman. She's, you know, the forward facing of the globe. She's continuity. She's stability. Like, those are just fantastic, amazing things to say about somebody, like in almost euphoric language, if you think about it.
Bismarck's daughter.
Yeah, right. right. It's intense. But it's wild in a sense of saying, okay, well, yeah, you can have leadership where the public says we like that person. And no, the person is not perfect, because you don't expect that.
Yeah.
But you get this continuity, this stability. Even people who may say, I think she's horrible, but yeah, I agree with that. It's that stuff. That's something else.
Yeah.
And so, the fact that at least somewhere in the world, somebody thinks that way of whoever's in power.
Quite a bit. Quite a few people, it seems. And it seems like that would be the take.
It's hard for me to conceive of Germany without Angela Merkel. And I think that's the point that he makes. Like, regardless of like how would they see her internally and everything else, when I think of Germany, Merkel is a person who's in power, because she's been a person who's always been in power in every year that I've been aware of Germany in any kind of
political space.
It's very wild and it's very heady for this. Like, okay, now it's going to change. Change to what?
Yeah.
What does that mean? What is the policies going to be? For example, if Angela Merkel wasn't there when that little girl was saying, we need help, let us into the country. And she's like, well, I mean, I'm sorry, we already have too many of you in the country. If that wasn't Merkel, who says, okay, fair enough, we can let you in, would they have let her in? Because all of the public will was against that. Meaning, this is the philosophical argument against democracy on some level, right? This thing of mob making a choice. And sometimes the mob doesn't always make the right choice. And you need, it's like, how do you have the factor to prevent the mob from making a choice that it doesn't necessarily think is right? And speaking to people who are there, they would be like, look, Germany is ancient. They're old. They need us. I know they don't want us here, but they need us. And that's kind of the point. And on some level, that's the point of Merkel in bringing many of those people in. Yes, I think she had a heart. And yes, I think that heart broke when the little girl said that and she let the people in after that. But on some level, there was a reality to what that guy was saying. In order to keep Germany going, Germany needs something else other than just Germans. It's an interesting thing. But it gets to this notion of the leader versus the group, and how the leader can make a decision that goes against the group, and that choice might be right. And it's the argument against.
Well, it's true, and you're also looking at it kind of, and I understand we have headlines, but you're looking at it also like almost sort of symbolically and like almost like metaphysically. Like there is, the group, the leader, like in terms of these sort of conceptual. At the same time, and there is a level in which that is absolutely applicable.
Yeah.
At the same time, in terms of her administration, like we were talking with Brian McDonald the other day, if Putin is on his last term, if Obama's on his last term, whatever.
Boss is going off watch. What happens?
Boss is going off the reservation, and they need to start. There's going to be somebody else coming in There's the sort of diffusion of responsibility or obligation. It's like, okay, do I need to get this done by Tuesday? Or is it going to be, is it really going to be a problem?
Even worse, an interregnum where you have no idea who's going to be in power.
Yeah.
And it's a vacuum and everybody is kind of clawing to try to get it. It's like that seems to be what they are trying to prevent in big terms.
That's the succession problem, and that's what causes the decline of basically anything.
Yeah.
The problem with that, of course, is if you said, I'll be brief. On the one hand, you have a succession problem. On the other hand, you have rent seeking, which is on the one hand, you have completely dysfunctional elites who can't pass the baton from one generation to the next. On the other, you have completely controlling elites who have far too successfully been able to pass the baton from one generation to the next. You want something in between. You want, some powerful, competent people in charge.
On some level, providing that what was going before was correct.
Yeah, and you don't want unrestrained power.
Yes.
You don't want complete corrupt over, that's just a dynamic there for people.
I would say, at the very least, a continuity of ideology of sorts, providing that the ideology is within line with the public's will. I mean, that's kind of what it is, right? I mean, reality doesn't give us any outs. It's just, All right, let's go to the headlines. In the news, about 16,517 new COVID cases were reported in the United States yesterday, with about 269 new deaths. Over the past week, there's been an average of about 12,809 cases per day, an increase of 5% from the average 2 weeks earlier. 47% of the total American public has been fully vaccinated, and 55% of residents have received at least one dose. As of this morning, the coronavirus has infected about 33,656,144 human beings across the United States and has killed an even more unfortunate, ideally, 604,756 Americans. The organizers of the Tokyo Olympics said they still could ban all spectators. And it's going to be very surreal. The U.S. Attorney General has put a moratorium on federal executions pending a review of the death penalty by the Justice Department. This follows the brief assumption of the death penalty last year by Trump's AG William Barr, which ended a 17-year hiatus on the practice. The House on Wednesday voted to create a committee on the events of January 6th. And what's riling feathers among some of the right is that Liz Cheney is on that committee. Liz Cheney is Republican, just in case you didn't know. The House yesterday passed a 5-year, $715 billion infrastructure bill, which authorizes a 50% spending increase. Now, this is going to run into a headwind of the Senate's bill, which focuses less on the climate change issue. We're going to have a conversation about this a little bit later, but we'll have a conversation on it later. The Trump Organization has officially been charged with running an employee tax scheme for 15 years. Donald Trump's chief financial officer, Alan Weisselberg, faced charges of grand larceny and tax fraud, as well as avoiding $1.7 million in perks that should have been reported as income. Mr. Trump was not charged, and no other executive in the company has been touted for wrongdoing. American sprinter Shah Carey Richardson failed the drug test and has been disqualified from the Olympics. She tested positive for marijuana, not steroids, but she's still been denied a shot at the gold medal and also faces a 30-day suspension. Wasn't aware marijuana was a performance-enhancing drug, but okay. The Boy Scouts of America have offered to compensate sexual abuse victims in an $850 million settlement. This, more than doubling of the initial settlement, comes on the back of an organization declaring bankruptcy after 275 potential abuse lawsuits spanning 1,400 cases were levied against them. Since the victim deadline in November 2020, over 90,000 claims have arisen, making it one of the largest sexual assault scandals by a single organization in history. Oh my God, 90,000 claims. Shouldn't even call them the Boy Scouts. The last United States troops have left the largest base in Afghanistan, the Bagram Air Base. On Thursday, American Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin spoke with his Afghani counterpart, telling him that the United States is invested in the, quote, security and stability of Afghanistan, unquote, as it withdraws its troops. Israel is carrying out an air raid on Gaza following the launch of incendiary balloons by Gazan militants. Israel said they are targeting a weapons manufacturing site. The UN World Food Program says it resumed work in Tigray following the withdrawal of Ethiopian government troops from the regional capital of Tigray, Mekelle. Officials with the program said entrance to the territory was still difficult. Iraq has been hit with a widespread power outage reportedly caused by failure of the key power line in the country. This comes at a time when temperatures across the country are at extreme highs. The former deputy leader of Golden Dawn, a Greek neo-Nazi party, has been taken into prison following 9 months in hiding. And last, North America has been hit with a historic heat wave over the past week. The Pacific Northwest has been hit the hardest, with hundreds dead, and cities struggling to cope with the increased energy demand. Seattle saw temperatures of 108 degrees, Portland of 116 degrees, and Lytton, British Columbia, destroyed Canadian records, reaching a scorching 121 degrees Fahrenheit. Those are your headlines. You're listening to Fault Lines with Thomas and Stranahan. So there are a few of these that we can go back to, but the one that jumps out to me is the Boy Scouts of America one. $850 million settlement. This more than doubling the initial settlement comes on the back of the organization declaring bankruptcy after 275 potential abuse lawsuits spanning 1,400 cases were levied against them. The victim deadline in 2020, there's over 90,000 claims. So an organization that allowed young boys to go off with strangers for years. And nobody thought, kind of like the Catholic Church, to say, hey, if nobody is looking to check to make sure that those kids aren't being abused, is it possible that those kids are being abused? 90,000 claims. I mean, think of the number of people. I mean, is it really the Boy Scouts of America at that point, or is it basically a haven for boys to be molested, which it seems like it was? It is astonishing. You understand, there's no such thing as justice and stuff like this. Meaning there's no way to balance the scales. How do you balance the scale in this? And does dollars really balance the fact that the kids were being molested or abused or raped? This is utterly and entirely horrendous. The Catholic Church and the way that the church would operate, there would be someone who would be abused, and when the people would come up with the story would bubble up, or they would move the priest to a different area, as if being moved into a different area was in and of itself enough to stop the guy from being a pedophile. I guess I'm saying it's a jarring thing to read. I put it that way. Shane, I'm talking about the 90,000 claims against the Boy Scouts of America, that basically over the course of all of these years, parents would send their kids and they would trust that the organization, for whatever reason, were not going to do anything to their kids. And of course they should. And human beings on some level should be able to trust other human beings and stuff like this. And yet, reality doesn't care about what I want. It just is. In this very specific case, you have all of these kids that were basically, I don't want to say broken, but at the very least, inappropriately touched, to put it mildly.
Yeah.
And so it's like, how do you balance the scales? You can't balance that scale. You give them money. That's it. And because people talk about this justice stuff, they'll say justice, and all this. Okay. What is justice? And then it was like, okay, well, this is justice. Okay, but is it? Is it really a balancing? I mean, you can never really erase the other stuff. The only thing you ever try to do is really balance it. And there's no way to balance it because how people see it is so different. Meaning there's no way for me to ever fix these kids or, balance the equation with these kids. It's just an organization. And then you have the secondary question of nobody was looking after a Boy Scouts of America thing. I mean, boys is in the title. It seems like it would be this kind of, feeding frenzy of people who like boys. Like, I guess it just seems like the bar should have been so high for what they were allowed to do. And it didn't seem to be that way. And I don't know if people were just more trusting back then. Like, oh, nobody would ever do that. They're Boy Scouts. Why would they do that? And you think that it's like, are you insane? Like, it's just weird. It's a very dispiriting headline to read. I put it that way. There's no way to balance that. And that's just an unfortunate. Yeah, that's an unfortunate case. I mean, this is basically an organization that was a haven for this, every bit as much as the Catholic Church. So, yeah. The other one, let's see, the House veto bill, there's that one. The Attorney General moratorium on federal executions. That part, to me, was interesting, too. So, the bar for, I don't know, for whatever reason, it's like, hey, let's start back executions. And then you're like, why are you doing that? Like, that's so random. Like, why, if your federal government didn't have executions, would you take the extra step of saying, this is something that I now need to do? Now, Joe Biden was one of those people that was screaming at Ronald Reagan because Ronald Reagan wasn't using the powers that he endowed to him to execute more people. But to take the specific act of saying, I am going to change this policy to now allow something that wasn't allowed, and the thing that I'm allowing is the killing of more people, and you think to yourself, okay, are you doing that to penalize, or are you doing that to deter? Or is it a little bit of both? Or do you not care? You just want to be tough?
Yeah, or are you doing that because the constituents of your party broadly would like it?
But that's so weird. Like, that's so random.
Isn't that what they're supposed to do? Aren't these people all representative of us in some sense? I don't like the death penalty, so I'm not really defending that specific.
No, I know what you mean. You're pointing out this thing of like,
if a lot of people want it, if Barr was put into place by Trump, who was elected by people who want the death penalty back, then shouldn't he do that? Quite simply, if it's constitutional.
Well, it's not. Well, that's not what I'm getting at. It's not so much of the latitude of action. It's more so of all the things that you can do.
Yeah,
why that?
I think it's an easy,
so bizarre.
Maybe it's just an easy change that he thought would win some points or something like that.
I give you another example. There's a woman, my wife hates when I do this, but every time, so often we would drive by somebody with a sign. And if the sign is interesting enough, I would stop by to talk to the person. And so this woman had a sign that says, don't vote for Obama because of, gays. Don't vote for Obama because of gays. And I was like, that's such a weird thing to go with. Like, you didn't go with, hey, because he didn't do, I don't know, is not supporting Medicare for all, or he's not supporting this, or because he did a war or something. It's not that. You took all that out of the table, and your thing was, Obama is backing gay marriage, so you shouldn't back Obama. And you're like, okay, explain. Because at that point I was curious. It just seems like it's provocative because it's so weird. Like
maybe, or maybe it's just weird to you. For a lot of people, this stuff is personal. And for a lot of people, like, again, I can try to play a lawyer.
It's like you wake up in the morning, you be like, you know what, I need to get the death penalty back on. That's what I need.
You extend an arm of empathy or something like that. You try to put yourself into the mind of somebody else. If marriage is a sacred institution that is the foundation of not just civilization, and I mean literally civilization, you know, a man and a woman. If this is, again, speaking in somebody else's voice, if this is the thing that binds us all together, then when you imperil that, you're imperiling everything. And if you do that casually, not cautiously, if you do that casually without being aware of what you're doing, you're a fool.
Yeah.
And therefore you're worth opposing. Again, not my opinion, but I can see how somebody might view it that way. And I can have an argument with that. I can debate with that. For them, that is a pivotal issue.
I don't know what that means. Something opposing because of a man and a woman? What?
Yeah.
What am I missing?
If somebody believes that marriage is a sacred institution,
right,
and not just a sacred institution, but a vitally important one for the maintenance of our civilization or our society,
right,
and that marriage has been and should be between a man and a woman,
right,
if that's their contention,
right,
then they can see it as a super important issue. It's just that you and I are a bit detached from it. And for me, I'd probably look at that sign and be like, that's kind of weird. I'd probably have the same first response. But like, I can imagine how somebody could get into it.
I mean, but
you know?
This is a governmental device. This is, you think of all the things that an AG and people can do.
Yeah.
And within the context of all of those things, he chose this.
Yeah,
it seems sadistic on a level. That's all.
Nah.
It seems, you don't think so?
No, I'm just thinking about it.
Oh, yeah.
I kind of agree.
It's it's so,
because I don't like the death penalty.
Spiteful and mean-spirited. I mean, because it's like, what are you doing that for? Like, and like taking the politics out for the moment. Because the politics isn't supposed to govern what you do. What you do is supposed to be pragmatic, good governance for the best interest of the country, that you may have an ideological slant.
Aren't you supposed to do what the people want you to do? Isn't that literally the foundation of this whole democracy idea, representational democracy?
When they sign up for the best interest of what? The Constitution, right? The democracy, the republic. There are times where the public is right. There are times where the public is wrong. And so it depends, right? It's not that straightforward. We're just going to do what the public says, because that's not what our politics does. I can go down the list of policies.
I hear you,
but they ignore
and I get it.
Things.
And this is a problem with democracy. But if we're going to play the game of democracy, if we're going to play within representational democracy,
right?
Exactly. And we put a representative in it, and then all of a sudden they're like, "You guys actually didn't know best. I know you elected me on this, but instead of voting A, which you want, I'm going to vote B."
I'm not saying that the person
aren't they breaking the rules? Isn't that a more sacred
no.
violation of the whole system?
I'm not saying that the person should just blow off how they got there. Like, you know, it's like if you got there saying, I'm going to pass $15 an hour, that's very specific, very specific. By the same token, I don't expect you to tank the country. I don't expect you to, let's say, make choices or for example, I don't expect you to get in and defund the police department because your base is screaming defund the police department. You says, you know what? My base put me in to do this. And so, yes, I am going to cut the budget of the cops by 50%. Figure it out. Our ideology will lead the way. I don't expect that, right? That would be insane. No, I expect governance, and I expect this kind of mix between, all right, I'm representing you, and this is what I'm trying to do within the context of what you put me in this office for. That's all I expect. I don't expect this exact representation of what I want. I expect I am in, I see the wider field in regards to the information, everything I get. Yes, this is what I'm going to try to do. No, I'm not going to always get there. I expect that push and pull thing, but I expect the person to be competent. Meaning, yes, I expect the person to be competent when the person gets in office. It's that. But no, I don't have this expectation that the person is going to do exactly what the public wants. No.
But if they do what their constituents want,
yes,
then isn't that what they're again? That's my thing. Isn't that what they're supposed to?
But I'm not disagreeing with you. I'm not disagreeing with you. We have to go to the guests. I know, but I'm not disagreeing with you on this. If you put a candidate in that says, I want $15 an hour, and it's a feasible, doable thing, then you should do that thing, and you should die on the field trying to get that thing done. If you're trying to pass defund the police because your public says defund the police, I think you're insane if you're going to cut the police budget by 50%. Whatever you told the public. Meaning, regardless of what they want sometimes,
but isn't that,
you may have a constituency that is just wrong.
I hear you, but how are they going to learn, Jamarl? How are they going to learn?
Oh, unless you defund the police and it's like, look at all this crime.
Exactly. How are they going to learn from their mistakes?
At that point, ideology is going to take over, and it's like, well, because the people there didn't do blah, blah, blah. It's going to be that nonsense.
Maybe. But I don't know, man. It's broken down either way. Let's go into our break, though, so we can come back with Joel Siegel. Mm-hmm. Our guest, we're going to be talking about a couple of things, but we're going to start with Kamala Harris and internal divisions, some leaks that have been leaked by Politico from inside her office, basically, inside her wing of the administration, and people are disgruntled. There is something fractious going on over there where people really don't like her leadership, saying they're treated like crap, and that's not the word they used. You can imagine the one. Anyway, we'll be back with Joel Siegel talking about Kamala on the other side of this short break. Be right back.
Fault lines. Want to talk? Get in touch with us at radio@sputniknews.com.
Feeling kind of blue, but maybe also kind of red, and kind of purple, and kind of alone? You've got a friend on Radio Sputnik. Tune into Political Misfits from 12 to 2 Eastern Time, Monday through Friday, for news, politics, and culture without the two-party bias. Catch us daily on 105.5 in Washington, D.C., or 102.9 or 104.7 in Kansas City. Or find us on Twitter, Facebook, YouTube, Spotify, or wherever you get your news.
Fault lines.
Welcome back to Fault Lines on Radio Sputnik. My name is Jamarl Thomas. I'm joined with my co-host Shane Stranahan, coming to you live out of our station in Washington, D.C. If you guys live in the area, you can catch us on radio at 105.5 FM and 1390 AM. We're also in Kansas City at 102.9 FM and 104.7 FM. If you guys are digging what Shane and I are putting down, whatever platform you're consuming this content on, give us a like and share that audio or video. If you want to join in on the conversation, you can do so with a chat, a tweet, and of course, you can reach us by phone at 202-521-1320. That is 202-521-1320. Your engagement helps make this show what it is, so definitely don't be shy. And we're talking about Kamala Harris in this Politico piece. Quote, not a healthy environment, unquote. Kamala Harris often rife with dissent. And they're basically talking about a dysfunctional office. Right here. In interviews with 22 current and former staffer, vice presidential aides, administration officials, and associates of Harris and Biden described a tense and at times dour office atmosphere. Aides and allies said Florina, in an apparent effort to protect Harris, has created an insular environment where ideas are ignored or met with harsh dismissals and decisions are dragged out. Often, they say, she refused to take responsibility for delicate issues and blamed staffers for the negative results. This was the quote that Shane was talking about earlier. People are thrown under the bus from the very top. They're short fuses, and it's an abusive environment, said another person with direct knowledge of how Harris offices run. Quote, it's not a healthy environment, and people often feel mistreated. It's not a place where people feel supported, but a place where people feel treated like bleep. 4-letter S word. Have a conversation about what it's like to basically run an office. There is no better person to have this conversation with. Joel Siegel, Joe Siegel is a congressional staffer and co-author of H.R. 676, the Expanded and Improved Medicare for All bill, and one of the leading architects for the passage of the Affordable Care Act. He is co-founder and national director of Justice Action Mobilization Network, a nationwide multiracial climate action network. Joel, thank you for joining us.
My two brothers, how are you? Happy 4th of July.
Thank you. Happy 4th of July back at you.
Sure.
You would know better than anybody else about how an office is run. And as I read this, and as we were talking about this, your name came up pretty quickly as, all right, what is it like to run an office? What are the pressures? Because to me, as I read this, I thought they're under pressure and they're not dealing with the pressure well. That's the way I took it. But what is your take? Like looking at this article and from your experience working in John Collier's office, what's going on here? How are they getting this wrong?
Well, I'm going to go ahead and be completely honest today. Well, first of all, a lot of members of Congress will hire chief of staffs who are bullies. They have no training in human resources. I came to Mr. Conner's office. I had been the deputy director for the district's foster care system in human resources, and I'd studied management most of my professional career because I ran homeless shelters and government programs, and it's a real crisis in the Congress and the White House. Obama White House did not have a lot of drama because Obama wouldn't stand for it, but Harris, I've read the articles about Harris. The buck stops with her, and then ultimately it stops with Joe Biden, because Biden is the big dog, as they say where I'm from in the South. And there were so many days where staff would call me on my phone, tell me to come to their office, and they would cry on my shoulder, especially younger women, because of the brutality that they got from their chief of staffs, from the members. It's also a reflection of American culture.
Wait, just so I'm clear, you're saying this is normal?
It's normal, yeah. In fact, my first day when I came on the job, I walked in the office and Mr. Conyer said, "What's the next vote on the floor?" Because you have to tell the member of Congress what's the vote. You give them their vote sheet. I said, "I don't know." And he goes, "Look, Mr. Siegel, let me tell you one thing. We do two things in this job. We kill bills or we pass them. And if you don't know that, this may not be the job for you."
Wow.
And that was your entry. That was his introduction.
Welcome
for
to
you.
Congress.
And then, so the next day I went up to him and I said, "Listen, I want to have a civil and productive relationship with you." and he says, "You want a civil and productive relationship with me?" I said, "Yeah." He goes, "Well, there's the door." And he kicked me out. He kicked me out of his office and sent me home. Now, he called me back, and after that, me and him were cool for about 13 years. But they're not under that much pressure because the staff run the White House, the staff run the Congress. They're not under the pressure. The staff are under the pressure. Most of the pressure, though, came from, dysfunctional, shallow, bullying chiefs of staff who had no business being in that position. But the members of Congress often have attack dogs as their chief of staff because they themselves have that mentality. So, it's a reflection, too, of the American cowboy culture where we mistreat people and don't care because people think they have power.
But here's the thing. It doesn't seem to be getting any better. Kamala Harris's chief of staff, Tina Flournoy, I don't believe there's any relationship with Michelle Flournoy, just a shared last name anyway. Just a lingering thread for me. But regardless, she was active under Clinton, apparently, overseeing, President Bill Clinton's post-White House office. She was active then. If she was getting criticism at the time, why, is it just that she's effective and competence in this kind of thing is taken as, okay, this is the emotional damage that you have to, accept if you want to get things done? Is that the attitude? What's the attitude that lets this kind of thing persist? Joel?
I would say stupidity, ignorance, lack of professionalism. I mean, there's no correlation between, some attack dog chief of staff and then performance. In fact, my best chief of staff was Greg Moore, who had been the chief of staff for Jesse Jackson, who hired me originally. And, and then he had Julian Epstein in Judicial Committee. I love those guys. I could not wait to go to work. And then the legislative director named was Cynthia Martin, who stole $16,000 from the Congress. She was the most evil human being I've known in my life. But I was motivated because I was trying to do, single payer and housing for all. But it can crush motivation. But it takes its emotional toll. I'll be honest with you. Hostile work environments, first of all, are illegal under the law. When I told her that, she said, I don't have to follow the law, and it doesn't matter how I treat the staff because that's not my job. I said, it is your job, but it's what Congress and the White House need. They need training of the members and the staff on human resources and management. There's no management apparatus. There was no human resources that you could go to if you're having these problems, but you have a high attrition rate of a lot of your best Hill staffers and White House staffers leave because of dysfunctional bosses. And that's why you can get, people who just really aren't qualified working there because of those environments.
But it kind of seems like it would always have to look this way, right? I mean, if you think of the pressure, especially somebody like a VP office, it's not like you're in the Senate or in the House where you're trying to get something done. It's not that. You're the vice president. You're not going to get anything done, right? You barely have a job as is. And so it's like, okay, so you're in this kind of weird position that nothing is exactly going to push for you. I mean, like, it's just very strange. I mean, the thing or the incentive is probably we need to make Harris look good so we can be part of the presidential staff when she becomes president. And then it becomes like an impressive office. I think my issue is all of these Congress members are in this kind of political sport where anything that they do wrong, anything that happens, it can be blown up as a piece of attack to take them out of office. Meaning their job is always under pressure of competition. It's not like, you're working as a railway worker. And, it's like, okay, if I do my job, I'm going to have this job for 40 years. It's not that. You can do your job right and still lose. It's competitive sport constantly. And everything that you do is magnified. And so when you're looking at, okay, how do we hire people for this position? It's pressure constantly. And I think many of those offices get into this thing of kind of like, all right, how do we get people to do what we need those people to do? It's like, how do I train my dog, beat my dog? Or I can take the time to train it in a way where it gets treats and everything else where I don't have to beat it, et cetera. Well, most people say we don't have time for that. Beat their dog. It's that. I think it's the pressure of the position and the fact that you're in explicit and constant competition for being fired by the public. Am I wrong? Because I think that's where the incentive for that stuff comes from. It just seems like that it would be that way as a shortcut to trying to get things accomplished in the office.
Let me tell you something. I hear what you're saying. Look, I've worked in law firms. If you want to talk about pressure, I remember one of the lawyers I worked for said, I want you to give me every concealed weapons case in North Carolina from the late 1800s until, it was 1991, I think. And I need a memo on my desk. Now that's pressure. So I'll be honest with you. It's really, you guys have probably more pressure than these offices. It's about whether or not you can manage.
I don't buy that.
I don't buy that. Because like you say, it goes downstream. You blame Biden earlier. Okay, let's stick with that. The people who are in charge, let's say the candidate or whatever, need somebody to keep their office in line. They need a bad guy. They need somebody who's not like them. Meaning they don't want to have to fire this person or yell at this person to be mean to this. They don't want that. You need a Rahm Emanuel for that. And so they bring in that person to do that job because they need that job done. And I've seen this in other offices. This is not just politicians. I've seen this in corporate offices where they were like, all right, the bosses are more chill, they're more lib. It's like, all right, so we need somebody who's not like us.
We bring in outside business consultant.
Exactly.
Exactly.
Make the hard choices. It's that. I think that's what's going on.
The Glenn Ross thing. It's exactly what that is. Have you ever seen that movie?
I've seen the movie.
You have an outside salesman come in. I mean, if anybody who's seen the movie knows what I'm talking about, with Alec Baldwin there, who kind of terrorizes this sales crew and said, get your numbers up, that kind of thing. You bring in somebody from the outside. Joel, any reflections on that?
No, it's called incompetent management versus competent management. It's real simple. It's black and white. Either you can hire somebody who knows how to deal with people, understands policy, understands how to get things done. Look, for 13 years, I managed 14 staffers, okay? I never yelled at anybody. People loved coming to work. Mr. Conyers became the leader of the Democratic Party on progressive issues, and we were a family, and we got along great. You know, I think I wrote 16 bills or something like that. We all had fun. But then there were other offices where they had tyrants, and they made 21 and 22-year-old women cry.
But what about, let's say, Josh Whedon, for example? Now, I don't like Josh Whedon's methods. And Josh Whedon made that African-American gentleman cry, apparently, from the Justice League. But Josh Whedon has done some amazing work. And if you think back to either Buffy the Vampire Slayer, Angel, yes, I'm geeking out for a second, but I have a point. Angel, if you think to The Cabin in the Woods, you think to all of this work that this guy did that was utterly and entirely phenomenal.
As
and
director, Josh
as a
Whedon.
director, Josh
Firefly.
Firefly, that's the other one.
Yeah.
And you found out that the way he did it was basically by terrorizing his staff. In one case, scaring one of the women on Angel to the point of basically, you know, like if you don't do this, you're going to be fired. So I need you to come here like 2 a.m. or some crazy stuff like that. Like I need reshoots.
Truly
you're
abusive
overweight.
Stuff, where people are like wanting to have kids and keeping him from doing that.
He is very intense, but he is very intense for his craft.
Yeah.
And from his standpoint, I am not doing this alone. I am doing this with a group. I got to get this group in order for this group to do X, Y, Z. And then the group does amazing work. But the group is unhappy. But the group is unhappy because the group is doing their job at such a proficient way that is going beyond their typical proficiency. And he is horrible to get them to do that. Now, I'm not saying that that works for everybody. But isn't that on some level why it gets a pass? Because on some level, they know that, yes, this is normal because this is the way we get things done here. And the pressure, again, that I think that like the leaders are under, that they put on their staffs, whether staff see it directly from the leader or not. What are your thoughts? Am I completely wrong on this? Because, look, I'm not saying rah-rah for treating people horribly. That's not where I'm coming from at all. I mean, I've had bosses that were horrible bosses, horrible people. So don't misunderstand me. That's not where I'm coming from. I'm asking something a little different. Is this normal? Because on some level, the pressure, either from being publicly ridiculed, either from the media scolding you, or either from losing your jobs, which is basically what all of them would do if they could not get elected. I'm saying that's pressure. And you're telling me, Joe, that you don't think that's a lot of pressure. I think it is. I think that's a ton of pressure. I think that stuff falls down to the staff.
It sounds like you've been in it, Joel.
That's right.
And it sounds like you might be desensitized to it or something.
Is that what it is? Yeah.
No, I'm not desensitized. It's just that I'm a professional. I had years and years of experience working in government. Yeah. Had years and years of experience working under pressure. But if you're a professional, you learn how to deal with the
pressure. You take the flack and you use it. I get it.
Focus on the mission, et cetera, et cetera.
You make yourself a bit more mechanical, and you sort of ignore your emotions and whatever people are saying. You just get the job done, whatever it is you're supposed to do. I get what you're saying.
Well, you know what? I'm also a Buddhist, and I'm Jewish, and I study the Torah. I've been studying Buddhism since I'm 17, 18 years old, and with my spiritual beliefs, you're supposed to treat people with compassion and love and empathy. And I studied management. The biggest problem in the American workforce, especially in Congress and the White House, you're hiring people to manage people, and they have no training. Right. And it doesn't make sense. So you have workers who develop ulcers, insomnia, colon problems. And under the law, you cannot maintain a hostile work environment. You can jail for it. You can be, penalized for it. And it has to do with training. I worked in a Chinese law firm, and I told you I worked in the Chinese democracy movement. Chinese culture, which is thousands of years old, I have to tell you, they treat people like your family. They would ask me to have lunch with the team. American culture is just a few hundred years old, and we haven't quite developed a human culture yet where people are treated like a human being in a job.
Yeah, we're just more individualistic. I get what you're saying. That gets, philosophy of culture or something like that. But
we're mean. No, it's more than individualistic. America has a mean streak to it that has to be talked about, examined. No one wants to talk about it because it's sort of off the table, but it's a very important problem. The American workplace is one of the most brutal workplaces in the world. But I live in the South. I have to tell you, there's also a difference between working in the South and working in the Northeast. The Northeast is much more of a brutal culture.
It's true. It's true. It's because that's not a staircase you're climbing. It's a pile of dead bodies that keeps getting larger and larger the higher up you climb it. And it's true. The meritocracy, what the other side of that is that fierce competition. I'm not even saying Washington is meritocratic, but the dramatic inequality of power and the ability to get from a fairly low position of power to an intensely high position of power just by making the right moves, making the right decisions, knowing the right people, that kind of thing. Doesn't that support that? Isn't it just like the possible trajectory for Americans? Isn't that what, again, you've come far afield from the original conversation, but compared to a European country where the inequality isn't quite as extreme, the opportunity isn't quite as there, you just don't have as much motive for people to be vicious in the way that you see in America, that kind of mean streak. What's your take on that, Joel?
You're absolutely right. I lived in Europe for almost 4 months, and I'd go to colleagues and go to their workplaces, and I was in Spain. They were chill, laid back. After work, everybody went out and got tapas and drank. Same thing with the Korean society. After work, people go out and party and have a good time, but there's a sweetness there, and there is less pressure. Absolutely right. I did see that dynamic of people gunning for someone's job so they get paid more because the rent in DuPont Circle was for one bedroom, was outrageous. But when you go to work, you really see the best of America and the worst of America, because I had great chief of staffs there, and then I had horrible chief of staffs there. And, but again, what's going to happen is when you don't have proper management and you're in the White House, your best people are going to leave, and you're going to get yes people and people who just, will say yes, yes. And see, I never said yes to anybody. I did what I thought was right. Did I almost get fired a few times? I did. But you know what? I didn't care. I was doing.
Well, Joe, that means the Democratic Party has a problem because Kamala Harris is the transition candidate. And it seems like, whereas Joe Biden felt like, I'll put it in the case of an analogy. Somebody who wants to be a chess master, but doesn't mean, because they want to feel that lifestyle. It's like, oh, I can see myself being that. However, missing the point that you get there when one tournament after the next, after the next, after the next. There's no shortcut. It's just work. And you get the chess master thing because of the other work, meaning the chess master is kind of a quirk. It's a symbol. It's not the thing into itself. The symbol represents the person and their capability in doing this stuff, right? And so it seems like I get the feeling that that's kind of the way with Kamala Harris. So Joe Biden has been in politics, 40-something years? And Joe Biden, when he was vice president for Obama, you didn't hear this nonsense coming out of his office. And when Obama needed Joe Biden to do something, Joe Biden went and did it. And he backed up Obama like nobody's business. That was Obama's right-hand man. Joe Biden would have killed a person if Obama said, Joe, I need you to go kill this person because so and so and so, my birth certificate, blah, blah, blah. He would have did it. Joe Biden. Nobody would have heard a word of it, because that's how it seemed or came across, as if Joe Biden loved Obama that much. It felt like that. And so it's like now that he's president and he's saying, all right, I'm bringing in Kamala Harris. I'm going to be a transitionary president. Okay, transition president. And her office is in disarray. It doesn't seem like she wants to do just the basic things like going to a border that seems to be overboard. Joe Biden then shows how it's done by going to the apartment complex that fell in the condominium. And what does he do? I'm talking to the people. I'm empathizing. I'm emoting as America. I'm the heartbeat of America in this case.
And making a weird offhand comments about how it's a good thing.
Fair enough, but he's emoting for America. You get my point.
Yeah.
Like, in doing so, he's doing his job. Like, it's the job of the president on some level. When somebody gets shot, what did Obama do? It's not that Obama could do anything tangibly, like he's going to go out and like Batman to get the person. But he goes out and he emotes. Oh, this is a horrible day. And he has that Morgan Freeman gravity where he kind of gets this thing and America feels incrementally better for whatever particular reason, despite the fact that nothing has changed. She doesn't have that. She doesn't have that. And not just doesn't have it, it doesn't even seem like she can keep a competent ship in order. Meaning if you can't even keep your office in order, how are you going to run a country? But that's the person who they're saying is supposed to take power. Now, is there anything that I said that's wrong? That's a brutal, cynical interpretation, but that's what it seems like.
I think it's very accurate. Joe Biden. There were people on Mr. Connor's district to me that worked for Biden, and I said, "What's it like? What was it like?" And oh, Joel, it was like you were working for your dad or your. Well, they loved them some Joe Biden, But at the end of the day, the buck stops with Joe Biden. He's the president. Kamala Harris is the vice president, and it's up to Joe Biden to make sure that his entire office and staff are, managed properly.
But isn't that just shielding her?
Yeah.
Isn't that just redirecting energy that would be directed at her? Okay, I can buy the argument. Yes, technically, he's the president. He's the higher up. But like you're saying, he also is protected just by default because people have soft feelings for him, although those may be fading. But setting that aside for a second, Kamala Harris, she's the person whose office is apparently in disarray. It's not Joe Biden's. I understand she's under him, but regardless, by saying that it's Joe Biden and not Kamala Harris, aren't you just putting the attention onto the person who is already protected instead of Kamala, who's kind of on slightly thinner ice at this point? Joel, I don't mean to be too aggressive there, but what's your take on that?
No. It's not being aggressive at all. I'm saying that and doesn't matter what your job is. If you are the president or you're the CEO, you are responsible for the workplace. Joe Biden does not work for Kamala Harris. Kamala Harris works for Joe Biden. If Biden knows that there's a hostile work environment under his watch, he has to bring Kamala Harris into his office, have a long talk with her. He has to bring the chief of staff or whoever's the problem and let them know, look, this is how we're going to conduct ourselves. This is a pleasant work environment, and he has to look.
Joe, but if he has to bring Kamala Harris in at this point to explain to her how she needs to run an office, doesn't that say something about Kamala Harris's capability of running an office? I don't think Obama had to bring Joe in for this conversation. This is meaning it's shielding her. I don't understand why you're shielding her. She's an adult. Not just an adult. She wants to be president of the United States. And as wanting to be president of the United States, she clearly has those ambitions. I mean, she ran that horrible campaign where, again, she couldn't run her campaign. And so it's like, why are you shielding her?
If Joe Biden passes and she suddenly is president, she will not have Joe Biden to refer to.
You won't have Joe Biden to say, hey, Joe, unless you're going to dig him up from the grave and say, all right, Joe Biden should have told her how to run her office. And so it's not her fault. It's Joe Biden's fault, despite the fact he's dead.
If anything, if he's trying to be a fatherly figure who's like rearing her for responsibility or something, I'm not saying that it's that paternal, but it's like if there's an attitude of that, then she should be trying to deal. She should be dealing with this problem on her own. She shouldn't be coming to him. He shouldn't be having to come to her. Isn't this a Democratic problem, though? I mean, isn't Andrew Cuomo? I mean, it's not just a failure to respond properly to COVID and all the talking up of Cuomo last year as governor of New York, but the abuse in the office. Is there a narrative? Could there be a narrative that this is a specifically Democratic issue, that the DNC fosters a culture of workplace abuse, something like that? Joel, what's your take on that?
It's a human being issue. It's a management issue. There were plenty of Republican offices where they had the same. Because I was close to the Republicans as much as I was close to the Republican staffers. Because, I'll be honest with you, I got along really well with the Republican staffers and very well with the Republican members. But no, it's universal. Being an incompetent manager, not being a nice person, is a universal, human trait. But when it happens, you have to take corrective action. Now, Biden can't fire Kamala Harris, but he can absolutely manage her and manage the staff. And he does have the capability to fire anyone he wants to. He can fire a chief of staff. I mean, presidents fire, people all the time.
Think about what you're saying. The president of the United States will have to go into the vice president's staff and fire somebody that is supposed to be under her watch. That is so provocative. I mean, that's what I'm getting at. It just seems like this is a lot to go over just to avoid saying she doesn't seem to know what she's doing.
Maybe she doesn't. So if she's an incompetent manager, yes, you can be a vice president and be an incompetent manager.
But can you be a competent vice president and an incompetent manager?
Well, I'm not gonna say that Kamala Harris is an incompetent vice president.
But if she's an incompetent manager, ergo.
No, I'm not going to go that far.
I hear you.
The reason why I'm saying that is there are plenty of members of Congress who were very good members of Congress, but they didn't treat their staff well, and I can't equate the two. What I do know is the buck stops with your CEO. I mean, whether you're Jeff Bezos, right, or any CEO in the country is responsible for the management and how people are treated. That's why you have, Bill Gates probably has one of the most oppressive work environments of any CEO in the country. He's been in the New York Times. He hired this chief of staff who's run his shop for decades, and he's a jerk. And, Kamala Harris is going to have to be brought in, and this chief of staff, and they're going to have to straighten this stuff out because there's this thing that's called a leak. Leaks are Amy Klobuchar was supposed to be one of the meanest, persons that work in the Senate. Was she an incompetent senator? I don't think she is, but can there be a correlation sometimes of competency and how you treat your staff? Yes. I just can't say that about Kamala Harris, okay? What I can say is I feel really bad for all the staff who are being treated inhumanely.
Yeah.
It's up to Joe Biden to straighten it out. It's up to Joe Biden's chief of staff, actually, to probably straighten it out.
Interesting.
Probably will. Yeah, they probably will.
Well, with this leak, I sure damn hope they have the mindset to, or something like that. You'd think they would be. Anyway, Joel, we got to go into a break. We're going to be coming back, taking calls. Joel Siegel, thanks for the conversation. Fun talking with you, as always.
Oh, you too, man. Y'all have a good 4th of July, you and your families.
Hey, you too.
Thank you, man.
Have a great weekend. Happy Independence Day. See ya on the other side. We'll talk again soon, I'm sure. Joel Siegel is a former congressional staffer, co-author of H.R. 676. That's the expanded and improved Medicare for All bill. He's also one of the leading architects for passage of the Affordable Care Act, also known as Obamacare. Also co-founder and national director of the Justice Action Mobilization Network, JAM. And I'm Jelly, a nationwide multiracial climate action network. That's, not sequiturs. Well, Shane, why are you saying these things? I see Austin looking at me through what are you doing? Anyway, you're listening to Fault Lines with Thomas and Stranahan. 202-521-1320 is the number. We'll be back in just a minute.
Fault Lines.
So, Sean, what do you want to talk about today?
Well, Bob, that's easy. I want to talk about the need to stop the development of self-driving cars.
Again, Sean, you're driving me nuts. I think the self-driving car thing's already out of the gate.
No. It's never too late. See, now the leading experts in the field, just pick one, whichever one, leading experts have repeatedly warned us about the dangers of artificial intelligence. Look, I'm telling you, man, we have to stop the robots by any means necessary.
I see what you did there.
Yep.
Tune into our show by any means necessary daily from 2 to 4 p.m. Eastern Time on Radio Sputnik. And don't forget to call in at 3:20 p.m. to our studio number 202-521-1320.
And if you miss us live, check us out on SputnikNews.com, Spreaker, iTunes, iHeartRadio, Spotify, or wherever you listen to podcasts to stay up to date on the latest political, social, and economic movements shaping the world around us.
Fault Lines.
And we're back. You're listening to Fault Lines with Thomas and Stranahan. Our phone lines are now open for about 7 minutes now. They will be 202-521-1320 is the phone number. Again, 202-521-1320. Brave calling in from Atlanta. Brave, you're on. What's going on?
Hey, good morning, guys. So two things real quick. To your conversation about Kamala Harris, I don't think there's I don't know that it's as much a people problem or confidence problem as it is an entitlement problem. Consider the fact that
that's it.
She was christened by Hillary and her people to be the president, and she didn't even care to really to even care about managing her campaign to see that it would succeed. And she wasn't prepared for debates when Tulsi put a chainsaw through her. And so I think the frustration you see out of her is more so, like even with the questioning about have you been down to the border and all that, and why don't you just go to the border, right? I think it's more a thing of, listen, I'm supposed to be president. I'm just biding my time, and I don't care what people say or what's going on or what Joe Biden says because he's barely even there anyways. I'm just waiting for my time because I'm supposed to be the president, reclaiming my
right there.
That's what I think it is.
Right there. It's that. It's that.
Yeah.
And whereas Joe Biden didn't do that. Joe Biden spent 47 years in politics. And on top of that, and it's not a rah-rah Joe Biden, I'm just trying to show the difference between the two, where I would imagine Joe Biden would have done anything for Obama, period. None of this complaint stuff. They would have never said, when are you going down to the border, Joe Biden? They would have never had to say that. That's what I mean. Honestly, when Biden is out there talking at that group in Florida and is showing the condominium, and it's not that he can physically do anything as president other than I'm here, I'm showing I care. You can see that I authentically care, etc. That's his job. When Kamala Harris went to the border, what they said, they was like checking off a box.
Yeah.
Okay, she did this, out, done. That's not your job. You're missing the point. It's just like a Star Trek episode. There's this episode where Q is yes, perfect analogy. This woman figures out she's a Q, and
wait, she's a Q?
She's a Q, right?
What does that mean?
Like Q on Star Trek, it's godlike being, absolute power,
so
space
she
matter
figures
time.
out she's a member of this species
Exactly.
called Q that's like a godlike
the continuum, right?
There you go.
And she realizes, okay, I have powers now. Now the doctor says, look, I need you to do this experiment. Put this thing here. I need you to watch it over the course of, let's say, 6 hours and chart its progress, et cetera, because it's going to be this. And when she realized she has power, she's like, well, why do I have to wait? Just bam, just done. And the doctor comes back and is like, you've ruined this experiment. I needed you to sit there for the 6 hours. Meaning there's some things that you can't just jump to the end on. There's some things where you have to work your way through. And in the process of working your way through, you become something. That something being the thing that you want to be at the end. But you don't want to do that. You just want to jump to the end. It's that. And I think that's what screams out of this with Harris. And that's why I think she's like disliked. Honestly. I mean, like, she did not run a successful campaign. She was not successful in the primaries where people were like, yeah, Robert Harris. It wasn't that. They had to install her as vice president in order to wedge her into the presidency. That's a different thing than winning it, or, winning it within the context of competition.
You don't need Joe Biden to love her exactly. Well, because I don't care exactly who put her in. If the Clinton wing put her in, I don't like the Clintons and I don't like her. But it's like romantic marriages happen. Yeah. Just because Joe Biden doesn't love her doesn't mean that he can't be her vice president. And I'm horribly mixing metaphors here, universes. But you get what I'm saying. She's put in for political purposes and she's still useful for that, whatever. But I can't psychoanalyze her, although I do sometimes. I don't know what's going on inside her head. Right. But the very fact that that's the impression that you get, and I think a lot of people get, and that we express in the show, and other people express, you're right. Entitled, this feeling that you get that she's like doesn't want to be there, doesn't want to be talking to you. She's feeling kind of condescending.
Just supposed to be president, dog.
Just
and now you make me do work.
Yeah,
that stuff.
Something like that. The fact that you have that feeling is a big bad thing for her. Especially because of the nature of Joe Biden as president. Yeah. He's not like he's an old dude. Yeah. The expectation that she might become president soon is clear, and limpid. And so for anybody who's looking at her, thinking what she's thinking, you can bet she's like the impatient heir or whatever who just wants the dad to die so she can take over. And that's not a character you like.
No, it's
in
not.
Any fictional narrative.
It's not.
And symbolically, she's not a kind of person you'd like for this. Yeah. And I don't know if she's aware of it. I'm guessing she isn't because she's not acting against it. But it's the first thing she should be aware of. And from a branding perspective, at the very least, be like, I don't want to be that. Yeah. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah. Brave. Are you still here?
Yeah, I was going to say, I don't think that she cares about that, whether you like her or not. She wants what she wants. Kamala's got to have it. My other point was, very quickly, there's a lot of conversation about whether Joe Biden will make it for a second term, and then, of course, if Kamala Harris would be waiting so she can take over for the second term that he would not be able to carry out. Something that I want to throw at you guys, because I know I have my feelings and thoughts. Now that Bernie's bent the knee and the squad has been basically declawed unless Nina gets in there, my question is, do we see a primary of the Biden administration or Kamala administration next time around? And if so, who could it possibly be that would have the balls to primary them?
I have no idea, but that's interesting. That's very interesting. I mean, because when you think about it and you say, okay, it's Kamala Harris. I mean, I guess the question becomes, if something happens to Joe Biden, God forbid, within the administration, and she takes over, well, at that point, it's a president running, as opposed to, okay, a vice president running against whoever the Republican candidate is. Now, from the standpoint of the primary, does somebody say she is not who we need her to be? I don't know. I don't know who would do that. I mean, but I don't know. That's a good question, Brave. I have no idea. I'm inclined to say no, because I think every media space would be screaming at that person. Get out of the race. Get out of the race. How dare you? She's a black woman. This is going to be the first woman. I think it'll be that. I think it'll be utter hysteria from standpoint of media space if somebody tried to do that, because they would think you'd be trying to tank the chances, that type of weird stuff. But I don't know who that person would be. I don't know who it would be.
And she's not technically the incumbent there.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
We Brave, thank you for the call. We got Calvin calling in from North Carolina. Calvin, you got maybe 30 seconds here. Thanks for calling. What's on your mind?
Oh, well, you guys were talking about UFOs a lot, I guess, because recent stuff. And I was thinking about things like people were saying that, it could be just the government or either some other government's technology. But then I was thinking about, the government's been this 70-year prolonged campaign of denial and everything, Project Blue Book being an example of that. And when you think about the different things, they say it might be reverse engineering or either, actual,
10 seconds.
Technology or either homegrown. My thing is they don't take into account that people actually have experiences with otherworldly beings, like Barney Hills and in Africa with all the kids.
We're going to stop there. Those are your headlines. Well, it's not headlines, but you guys are listening to Fault Lines with Thomas and Stranahan. Back in a moment.
Listening to Radio Sputnik. Telling the untold.
Fault Lines.
Live from across the divided states of America, it is now time for another hour, our last hour this week, in fact, of the most disruptive show covering news, politics, and events from across these disunited states of America and the increasingly divided, embattled, fragmented surface of our globe. In the independent corner, I am your political analyst, Jane Stranahan.
And in the left corner, I am the indefatigable, the ever-vigilant, the last man on the wall, your political analyst, Jamarl Thomas.
And together, that means you're listening to Fault Lines with Thomas and Stranahan. Something about the surface of our globe. I'm just going to have to set this whole thing aside. It's surreal. Let's just get back into the natural flow of things tomorrow. I hope everybody here is having a wonderful morning. It's a beautiful day out there, I hear. Although weather yesterday in D.C. was nasty, to say the least. It was like a tropical storm monsoon for a minute there. Although, for anybody who's actually been through a monsoon. No, it wasn't, Shane. You're ridiculous. You don't know what you're talking about. Anyway, let's get into the headlines here. In COVID news, there were about 16,517 new COVID cases reported in the United States yesterday, with about 296 new deaths as well. Over the past week, there have been an average of about 12,809 cases per day. That's an increase of 5% from the average 2 weeks earlier. You heard that right, an increase. I usually use the word decrease in this section because it has been decreasing, like double-digit decreases, for what feels like decades, but is actually months. But it feels like, a very long time. Anyway, the numbers have ticked back up in terms of new cases, and reportedly that has to do with the increasingly widespread Delta variant, which is growing more prevalent as we speak. 47% of the total American public has been fully vaccinated at this point, and 55% of residents have received at least one dose of a COVID vaccine. As of this morning, the coronavirus has infected about 33,656,144 people across the United States and killed 604,756 people across the U.S. The organizers of the Tokyo Olympics say they could still ban all spectators from attending the several-week-long event. We'll be covering this more as we get into it. They keep saying we could suspend folks. It almost starts to feel like a threat after they say it enough times, but really they're just being honest. They still don't know whether they're going to accept people in. Yeah. Probably has to do with, global rate of COVID contraction. Might be some individual countries they're particularly worried about, and then they're undoubtedly also just looking at the baseline level of infection in Japan, which is, again, where this event is going to be cited. In national news, the U.S. Attorney General has put a moratorium on federal executions pending a review of the death penalty by the Justice Department. This follows a move by William Barr last year, who briefly resumed the death penalty by the federal government, ending a 17-year hiatus on the practice. On Wednesday, the House voted to create a committee on the events of January 6th, looking into what led to it and whether there is any congressional involvement in the riotous breach of the Capitol. What's riling feathers among some on the right is that Liz Cheney is on that committee. She's moved to that committee. Kevin McCarthy said that any Republican who joined this committee would be removed from all other committees they're on. She was already on the outs. This is just cementing that. And frankly, what did you expect? The House yesterday passed a 5-year, $715 billion infrastructure bill, which authorizes a 50% spending increase. And the Trump Organization has officially been charged with running an employee tax scheme for 15 years. Donald Trump's chief financial officer, CFO Alan Weisselberg, faced charges of grand larceny and tax fraud, as well as avoiding $1.7 million in perks that should have been reported as income. Mr. Trump was not charged, and no other executive in the company has been touted for wrongdoing. American sprinter Sha'Carri Richardson failed a drug test and has been disqualified from the Olympics. She tested positive for marijuana, not steroids, but has still been denied a shot at the gold medal and also faces a 30-day suspension. And she was thought to be one of the frontrunners for potentially getting that medal. So that's sad. The Boy Scouts of America have offered to compensate sexual abuse victims in an $850 million settlement. This more than doubling of the initial settlement comes on the back of the organization declaring bankruptcy after 275 potential abuse lawsuits spanning 1,400 cases were levied against them. If you think those numbers are worrying, then just wait. Since the victim deadline in November 2020, over 90,000 claims have arisen, making it one of the largest sexual assault scandals by a single organization in history. And Jamarl was talking about that. I'll come back to this too. In international news, the last United States troops have left the largest base in Afghanistan, the Bagram Air Base. Again, this is not a complete withdrawal from Afghanistan right here. This is the last troops leaving that air base. There's still troops on the ground in Afghanistan, but the largest air base that we were using, the sort of center of our operations in the country, we are withdrawing from. On Thursday, American Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin spoke with his Afghani counterpart, telling him that the U.S. is invested in the security and stability of Afghanistan as it withdraws its troops. And the Taliban has made a public comment. They're excited about this withdrawal too, as they would be, and as they've been taking ground speedily over the past few months. Israel is carrying out an air raid on Gaza following the launching of incendiary balloons by Gazan militants. Israel said they are targeting a weapons manufacturing site. The UN's World Food Program says it has resumed work in Tigray following the withdrawal of Ethiopian government troops from the regional capital of Tigray, that's Mekelle. Officials with the program said entrance to the territory was still difficult, but had been made more possible. Iraq has been hit by a widespread power outage reportedly caused by the failure of a key power line in the country. This comes at a time when temperatures across the country are at extreme highs. Again, I think it was 115 degrees Fahrenheit in Baghdad, or 115 degrees Celsius. They would all be dead. So it's thankfully Fahrenheit. The former deputy leader of Golden Dawn, a Greek neo-Nazi party, has been taken to prison following 9 months in hiding. And in Earth and Science news, North America has been hit with a historic heat wave over the past week. The Pacific Northwest has been hit the hardest, with hundreds dead. Cities there are struggling to cope with the increased energy demand. Seattle saw temperatures of 108 degrees. Portland rose to 116 degrees. And Lytton, British Columbia, destroyed Canadian records, reaching 121 degrees. And that is British Columbia. That's pretty far north to be seeing such high temperatures. I've been in BC. It's, like a Pacific Northwest-y kind of a climate. Beautiful and chill, broadly. 121 degrees tomorrow. That sounds a lot more like Mecca or Saudi Arabia or Iraq. Insane. The Saharan Desert. That's hot. Anyway, those are headlines. You're listening to Fault Lines with Thomas and Stranahan. Boy Scouts of America. This is going to be a weird claim, and I'm mostly saying it just because it's controversial, but technically true. I really hope most of those 90,000 claims are bunk. I really hope that because think about it. You don't want 90,000 people to have suffered. Right. So I hope that most of the claims are like people like inflating their experiences or just wanting money or some piece of a settlement or something. Because if you take it at face value, 90,000 cases, not even cases, 90,000 people, who many of whom would have, you can assume, been sexually assaulted multiple times. That's horrifying. Yes. That's huge. So I hope that a lot of those are fabricated. Controversial, but true.
Yeah.
Anyway.
I don't think they are.
I don't think they are.
I mean, just because if you think of the construction of the entity, right? I mean, it's an organization where parents, families would send their children, men or boys, and they would send those little boys to be held and shepherded by this men in the forest for these kind of nature skills. And they would keep them for however long they would keep them. But it's a situation where the parents are in no capacity to protect their children because they've given their children away. And you take this on for decades. And it's like, it's taken almost like by an act of faith that people wouldn't do it. No way they would ever touch my kid. Why not? Because they just wouldn't. God would prevent them from doing so. No, God doesn't care. They will touch your kid. They did touch their kids. And apparently 90,000. I wouldn't even be shocked if there were more. I mean, because if you think, this was for decades. I mean, it's just for so long. And I don't remember this ever being an issue, let's say like in the 90s or 80s, or let's say 2000s, where the Boy Scout thing hit the fan. It seems like it perpetuated itself for a very long period of time. And it seems like a lot of people who had an interest in children ended up at that location knowing that those kids were going to be away from their parents.
With this, as well as with the Catholic Church,
yeah.
But there's like two different takes here, and I feel like the truth is somewhere in between. One take is, this was happening the entire time, and recently we've improved.
Yes.
These kinds of disclosures have gotten a lot easier. The other is, this didn't happen nearly as much, and there simply wasn't as much to disclose. Isn't it possible that the truth is?
I don't buy that.
I don't know where it is in between.
Oh, I don't buy that. But that's the Leave It to Beaver stuff. Like if you look at television today.
Yeah, things have actually gotten worse. People's ethics have degraded, something like that.
But they hadn't degraded on some level. Is it just we're being more honest? Is it that? I think it's that. I think it's both. I think it's
a bit of both. And it's not up to me to determine which it is. All I know is that it should stop. And we should do what we can to make it stop.
I don't know what it means to make it stop. Oh, you mean the pedophilia? Yes. You should make it stop.
The acts of sexual abuse
that institution should no longer exist.
Yes.
I mean,
you mean the Boy Scouts of America?
It should no longer exist. I mean,
should there be something like it?
How can they perpetuate itself after something like this?
But should there be something like it? An outdoors movement for kids.
Wouldn't be sending my kids to it.
You wouldn't be sending your kids outdoors into groups of people?
No.
Would you send them to school with teachers?
Yes.
Why?
But that's different.
Why?
You don't have a proliferation of pedophilia in teachers.
How do we know?
Are you serious?
Yeah. Yes. How do we know
that you don't have a proliferation of pedophilia in teachers?
I'm sort of playing devil's advocate because
but you need something to back that up. The Boys Scouts of America is literally being basically destroyed for doing it with a history of it.
But if we didn't know about this and it were just the Catholic Church that were coming out, and I was like, dude, there's a big problem with the Boy Scouts of America. And you're like, but how do we know? We're not hearing about it.
Yeah.
How do we know? How do we know, Jamarl?
Well, we know because 90,000 kids have come forward, and we know it because it's real. As opposed to the Catholic Church, we know it again because it's real. And if you want to say, hey, go out and make your case. Go out and make the argument that public school is basically a bunch of teachers who are pedophiles.
Yeah.
I need evidence for that.
I hear you.
And you don't have it.
No, it's that simple.
It's that. I don't think it's mild, or I don't think it's funny to make, this kind of cute argument about, hey, how do we know that teachers aren't pedophiles?
Of course, that's not what I'm doing. But you're saying
that is exactly what you just did.
No, because you're saying that we should not have a group like this. What is it about being outdoors that makes people pedophiles, Jamarl?
I have no idea.
So you think that there is something?
What I do know.
You think that there is something
no.
about being outdoors that makes them more pedophilic?
Dude, you asked the question.
Exactly.
That means that if you're asking that question, you have some idea that there's something outside that makes people pedophiles.
Well,
That's nothing to do with me.
There shouldn't be anything like this
That's nothing to do with me. I am making the point to you that this is real life as a reality. And it's not, I'm going to play devil advocate and be cute about
I'm going to quote producer.
Jokes. Yeah, I don't think the pedophilia jokes are funny.
Since 2000, 1 in 10 students in K-12 have experienced sexual assault in American schools.
Okay.
If I were to look up, 1 in 10 students. In other words, 10% of the population of people who attend schools. And it's not necessarily at the hands of teachers. In fact, if I were to look into it, I wouldn't be surprised if most of those were other students. But still, that sounds like a dangerous environment. 10% of the people going into that. I'm betting that the Boy Scouts of America didn't have that higher rate of sexual abuse.
Do you know that?
What do you mean?
Do you know that? Do you know that the Boy Scouts of America has a less rate of sexual abuse than the potentials in schools?
No, but now we're just debating facts. And if we want to, we can set aside some time to research. My point is, there's nothing about the Boy Scouts of America that seems uniquely disqualifying from something like it existing.
Dude, and you asked me what I do.
Yeah.
And I said, I would not send my kids to that.
Yeah.
Then you insinuated that there's something being outside that makes people pedophiles.
Of course, because the joke is
ludicrous.
Of course.
But I don't think pedophilia is funny, Shane.
Exactly.
That's the catch. Like, it's not all a joke. And I don't know what it is. It's like, it's not about...
Okay,
there's real life.
But what was I joking about? What was I joking about?
There's real life things. And in this case, you have a real life case of kids being molested, seemingly en masse, by an institution going forward for decades.
Yeah.
That's a real life thing. That's a real reality thing. That's 90,000 kids that we think of as being abused. I don't know how the 90,000 kids gets transformed into, hey, what about being outdoors in the wilderness that makes people pedophile? I don't know. I have no idea.
Because we're talking about whether or not something like this should exist. And
you're asking me, and I'm saying I would not send my kid. No. Because I have to trust the person that I'm sending my kid to. And at the very least, from the standpoint of a public school, there's all sorts of institutions or things that are there as opposed to this kind of private institution where these kids are going out into the wilderness. Yeah, I think there's a difference of credibility and, let's say, culpability, or at the very least, observation.
But 1 in 10 is a damn big number.
Why
isn't this?
Are those coming from teachers?
Here's another way of looking at this. That's the thing. But if it is or if it isn't.
By the way, what is the average rate of abuse in families in general?
That's a good thing to look up. That's the thing. It's undoubtedly higher than 1 in 10. But should we be adding to that? Is the thing. I can. You could also say you shouldn't be joking about this. If I could say the same thing, we shouldn't be debating about it. This is too important. We need to set this kind of fractious conversation aside and come back to it with clearer minds or whatever. But we debate. It's our job. I try to be humorous sometimes. It's my job.
Yeah,
frankly.
But it's like, do you need to be humorous about pedophiles?
Well, I try to be humorous about murder. I try to be humorous about the worst things because I'm not even a comedian.
You can do that. You can have that. You can do that. You can. That's fair enough.
Yes.
I try to talk about real things. And
are you saying that I wasn't?
Excuse me?
Are you saying that I wasn't?
Yeah, I'm saying that if you're making an argument or if you're insinuating that being outdoors makes people pedophiles,
here's the thing.
I think it's ridiculous.
The conversation as you set it up was not exactly what happened. You said you wouldn't send your kid to Boy Scouts of America. Then I asked, should Boy Scouts of America exist? Should an organization like it exist? And you said no.
And
that's what I focused on. That's what I responded. I understand.
And I'm telling you from my standpoint, I would not send my kids to something like that.
You're who I'm talking to. That's just what it is.
But I'm telling you from my standpoint, I would not send my kids to something like that. No.
Yeah. And then we got into the conversation of whether it should exist. And then I'm like, is there some magical quality about being outdoors? That's the joke. But
I don't
it's ridiculous.
know if there is a magical quality about being outdoors that makes people
That's why it's a joke, because of course there isn't. Of course there isn't. And I know you're on the same page. I'm just making fun with it because, of course, in my opinion, there should be something like this because something like this seems to serve a good purpose. Kids being able to be outside and like go on hikes. I enjoyed doing that. I didn't join the Boy Scouts, thankfully, apparently, but if I had, and if it had gone well, it probably would have been a really good experience. I've heard good things about this kind of thing. And there's this weird thing where like we judge an institution as if there's something essential about that, when we can have a healthy society that is able to do things like this without the rate of pedophilia being so damn high.
And yet here it is.
And yet here it is.
Yeah, here it is.
And it's probably both being disclosed more and happening more is my contention.
I don't think so. I think it's just being disclosed more. Meaning, I don't think there was this better past. I don't think in those regards.
Yeah.
I think that people get more honest in talking about it. I think it's that. I mean, think about the stuff that used to take place from the standpoint of either Native Americans, from the standpoint of civil rights, and you get this kind of ward cleaver. That stuff is like, it's that, right? And so it's like as you get more, for whatever reason, you get into this more of a realism stuff. And I think it just got disclosed. I think that, and look, you can make an argument and say, okay, in the beginning, it might have been 1 or 2. Kind of like the expansion of the universe. Okay, started off with 1 or 2, then maybe 5, then 10. And then people realize, hey, nobody's paying attention. And it kind of grows and grows and grows and grows. I think that's fair. And in this case, you can say, okay, well, fair enough. If that's true, then the later it got, the worse it got because there was more, in which case it got uncovered.
Yeah.
That's a fair, I guess, interpretation of it. Either way, I think it was there. I think it perpetuated itself over the course of years. And whether it got worse or not, I think it was bad for a very long time. I just don't think it's just this. People are just horrible now. I don't think it's that.
No, I don't think it's that either. But I guess part of that is I like to push back against this narrative that people automatically get better over time because people in an abstract sense can get more ethical. They can get less ethical. How we act is often just a response to our environment.
Yes.
And I would guess environments change in ways that'll, you get what I'm saying.
Yes.
I don't know if it's gotten better. I don't know if it's gotten worse, but it's just a guess. It's probably somewhere in between. There's probably a higher prevalence and there's a lot more disclosure of it too. And the second one is definitely good.
Yeah.
Anyway, that's a matter about which we will have to remain uncertain. We're going into a break, and we'll be coming back, keeping conversation going here, talking with Jordan Sheridan, investigative reporter and co-founder and CEO of Status Quo. We're going to be talking about Joe effing Manchin, and also this House committee on January 6th. You're listening to Fault Lines. We'll be right back.
Fault Lines. 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. We give you the most essential information out there. Radio Sputnik, telling the untold. By Any Means Necessary is your guide to the movement and efforts shaping the world around us, from mass incarceration.
No longer am I interested in or concerned with prison reform. I am interested only in the eradication of prisons.
To the battle between police and water protectors.
It was a pretty punishing disregard for the sanctity of human life, that unleashing water cannons on peaceful, prayerful water protectors.
From efforts to protect the environment.
The climate movement is ready to, with plenty of opposition research and force and strength, along with, the right of both science and morality, to fight them on this.
To the movement for Black Lives.
When I first saw the Michael Brown video, and I saw that it clearly contradicted the narrative put forth by the Ferguson Police Department and by police supporters in general, 3 words came to mind: color me shocked.
Stay tuned to By Any Means Necessary, 5 days a week here on Radio Sputnik. Fault Lines.
Welcome back to Fault Lines on Radio Sputnik. My name is Jamarl Thomas. I'm joined with my co-hosts coming from our station out of Washington, D.C. If you guys live in the area, you can catch us on radio at 105.5 FM and 1390 AM. We're also in Kansas City at 102.9 FM and 104.7 FM. If you guys are digging what Shane and I are putting down, whatever platform you're consuming this content on, give us a like and share that audio or video. If you want to join in on the conversation, you can do so with a chat, a tweet, and of course, you can reach us by phone at 202-521-1320. That is 202-521-1320. Your engagement helps make this show what it is, so definitely don't be shy. I was sitting here reading through an opinion piece by the Daily Beast. Joe assembled, quote, a Biden coalition, unquote. Democrats are set to junk it. Man, when you read the piece, he says something and he takes an astonishing opinion based on what he is saying that I don't believe entirely makes sense. If Democrats want to keep winning presidential elections, they'll ignore the pressure campaigns and unsolicited advice that are getting from their progressive base, social media, or cable news outlets and appeal to the center. At least that's what the data suggests. No, it doesn't. No, it doesn't. A New York Times analysis of Pew Research Center reports concludes Mr. Biden prevailed by making significant inroads among moderates and conservative constituencies, including married men and veteran household. And then when you go into reading it, it makes the point, it says, the correspondent Nate Cohn reports that Biden failed to improve his margins among virtually every voting bloc that backed Mrs. Clinton in 2016. Whether it was young voters, women, black voters, unmarried voters, or voters in urban areas. What is more, higher turnout did not reshape the electorate to favor Democrats. Even stranger, Biden gained among men, even while making no ground, or, according to Pew, losing ground among women. Lastly, Biden lost ground among nearly every Democratic-based constituency. His only gains among moderates, the conservative voting groups allowed him to prevail. And I made the point that if Biden had won the Hispanic vote in the margins that Sanders won it, he would have won Texas. Let's have a conversation with us. We are joined by Jordan Chariton. Jordan Chariton is an investigative reporter, co-founder, and CEO of Status Coup, a progressive media outlet that features investigative and in-field reporting on politics, social justice issues, and environment. And Jordan's reporting, even from the standpoint of the vote that took place on the union vote, the protests that were taking place around the country, he has been all over the place, and he is phenomenal in regards to getting video, even at the Capitol 6 riot that was taking place, where they basically shut down the ability for these channels to transmit, and YouTube basically attacked videos that was used before Congress. Jordan, thank you for joining me, man.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Absolutely. So what do you make of this analysis? And let me put it in these terms. Joe effing Manchin. Because basically what the Daily Beast is saying is Manchin is right. That the way to go about this is just to listen to Manchin. Just to say incrementalism. Emancipatory incrementalism. As if those things could be one. And he just blows off the whole notion that he lost Clinton constituencies. Like meaning Democratic base. He just, on some level, wasn't able to make any gains in that. And he just, all right, well, we just need to go moderate. What does he think is going to happen to those constituencies the more moderate that he goes? Does he believe this is zero sum? It's nonsense. Where are you going to get your biggest bang for your buck? Now, the Manchins of the world would say we should be bipartisan. We need to work with our Republican colleagues, and we need to blah, 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 blah. What is your response to the Manchins of the world or the people of the world that says, no, emancipatory incrementalism? is the way to go. That's what the public wants. That's what the public needs. What's your thoughts?
My thoughts are that I'd put a 99% guess that these Daily Beast writers and others like it have rarely left their cubicle to talk to anyone in West Virginia or other parts of the country. Because if you go around and actually take the temperature around the country, whether it's progressives you're talking to, even conservatives, the first thing they're talking about is not waxing poetic about the bipartisan days of yesteryear. They don't really care about bipartisanship. They desperately care about their wages being raised. I'm talking about conservatives too. Desperately care about the problems with their water, which is growing all over the country. Desperately care about the fact that their schools are crumbling and closing. Desperately care that their roads are undrivable. I mean, I could go on and on and on. I was just in West Virginia learning all sorts of things about Mr. Manchin that aren't being reported by the national media. But no, this is not true. This is how the corporate media manufactures consent for at least 30 years to keep the status quo. I mean, just look at the Midwest, for example. Joe Biden versus a deeply unpopular president, Trump, during a pandemic that Trump badly mishandled. It's not like he won in a landslide. Did not win Wisconsin by that much. He did not win Michigan by that much. Pennsylvania very narrowly. And most of the key states he won was not because of the voters that the Democratic Party was saying, we need Joe Manchin so he could reach those swing voters in the Midwest. In Detroit, more black people came out because people like Rashida Tlaib organized to get more black voters out. In Wisconsin, more black came out in Milwaukee than had come out for Hillary Clinton. In Atlanta, not the Midwest, a lot more black people came out in Atlanta giving Joe Biden Georgia. So this whole idea, mythical swing voters who just want to meet in the middle is just nonsense. It's completely counterfactual. Data doesn't support it. And if you are a journalist and would just kind of go outside and, breathe the air and talk to people, you would quickly realize that's a bunch of nonsense.
Jordan, you said the pretty intriguing thing that I want to come back to here, which is you've been in West Virginia, you've been looking into Joe Manchin, and you've been finding some stuff that people aren't talking about in the national media. Now that is that's a hook for me to grab onto if I ever heard one. What is Joe Manchin doing? Who is he? What do we not know about him, Jordan?
Yeah, so I think a lot of folks really focus on the top line, right? The National Democratic Party, the National DNC, as well as Republicans on the national level. But it's less sexy, but it's just as corrupt on the state level. So I've been investigating the West Virginia State Democratic Party, which Joe Manchin essentially runs. He's just like Nancy Pelosi runs California Democrats. And what I've learned is the West Virginia actually was a blue state for the last century. It only shifted to the right over the last 10 years. It's also that West Virginia and Mississippi are the two poorest states in the country. What I've been learning is Joe Manchin has literally been helping Republicans get elected in West Virginia by sabotaging progressive candidates. I spoke with a progressive who beat Joe Manchin in the 90s in the Democratic primary for governor, Charlotte Pritt, strong union supporter, strong on the environment, really, really progressive. She beat Manchin. And what did Manchin do? We hear from Democrats, fall in line, unite. When the primary is over, Manchin started a Democrats for Underwood group, her Republican opponent, and basically was helping the Republican Party beat her to put a Republican in office. The week heading into the general election, the progressive was up in the polls, and Joe Manchin, working with the Republicans of West Virginia, started pushing to run TV ads, basically fear-mongering that Charlotte Pritt wanted to teach first graders about condoms, wanted to allow children to have access to pornographic videos, all sorts of sleaze. And after she lost, because the progressive lost because of these things, she sued the Republican National Committee, and basically their answer was, don't look at us, look at Joe Manchin. Moving on to 2020, Paula Jean Swearingen, a progressive, lost to Joe Manchin in the primary in 2018. She won the Democratic nomination for Senate in West Virginia in 2020. And all we hear from Democrats nationally is how important the Senate is and how thin the margins are. Joe Manchin was literally tweeting, supporting the Democratic nominee, Paula Jean Swearingen's opponent, the incumbent Shelley Moore Capito. He also basically, through puppet strings, made the state Democratic Party not lift a finger for the Democratic nominee, Paula Jean Swearingen. They didn't allow her to speak at events. Union halls would not allow her to speak there. Manchin is very tight with the unions there. So basically, he has been not even being bipartisan with Republicans. He has been propping up Republicans and helping them get elected in West Virginia, in large part because the fossil fuel industry runs West Virginia and has bought Joe Manchin. So that's just some of the things we're learning.
Well, I get that the fossil fuel industry bought Joe Manchin. That's yes. And thank you for that, by the way. I mean, it gives a context to kind of West Virginia politics on some level and how it, I guess, mechanically runs, especially in the context of Democrats and these kind of right-wingers that keep power. Why does the public go for the right wing in West Virginia? Meaning I have my own ideas, but you've been there. You've been able to talk to the people that were there. So what is it about the Republican plan that they believe is going to alleviate, what, they're like 48th in the state? I think it was like 25% of the kids were poor or dirt poor, something to that effect. Like the numbers were astonishing. And so what is it about West Virginia that gets them to, yes, we're going to vote for this particular Republican?
Right. So this isn't only a West Virginia thing. This is really a growing trend around the country and actually around the world as more authoritarian fascists are winning on a phony populist message. But I spoke with a lot of West Virginians, particularly like activists, progressives. I even spoke with a few conservatives. And the common theme was, particularly with Trump, was, well, Democrats don't really have a message other than Trump's terrible. And, you know, we've gotten poorer and poorer over the last 20 years here with our roads falling apart, water problems, schools closing down, explosion in homeless. And that was the Democrats in control during that period. And they're not really, the Democratic Party is not running on anything in terms of economics. All they're running on is being better than the Republicans and kind of, you know, social issues. So basically when Trump came in, first of all, Bernie was extremely popular in West Virginia. He won every single county in 2016. Republican voters even liked Bernie Sanders, but obviously he wasn't an option in the general election. So basically they said, like a lot of people, particularly white people around the country, kind of working class white people, well, nothing's changing with the Democratic Party, so why don't we give this guy a shot? Particularly because he kind of co-opted a lot of Bernie's talk and policies, particularly on NAFTA and getting out of other countries. And he had a lot of populist rhetoric that people liked. So it's not necessarily the cultural issues that are, you know, capturing most of these Republican voters there. There's no populist alternative to the Republicans. So when you have Republicans come in and push populist rhetoric mixed in with some cultural red meat, they're falling for it. And that's not really on the voters. It's on the Democratic Party that has moved further and further to the corporatist right that's not offering any alternative.
So that is accurate content, but the context for that seems to be, and the implication seems to be, that Democrats are elitist, and that the space that Republicans are seizing, the populist space, they're able to seize because they're sort of casting themselves as the underdogs or the outside group, the opposition against this elitist ivory tower Democratic establishment. How much do you believe that? What's your take on that idea, Jordan?
I don't believe it. I've observed it. I've covered Trump's rallies in 2016. I got the therapy bills to prove it. 2020, and it really was kind of, I wasn't alive then, but kind of was this kind of, kind of memory lane to yesteryear, particularly to unions, a lot of populist rhetoric on NAFTA. The corporate media kept pushing this fantasy that Vladimir Putin decided the election. Trump had them at NAFTA.
Because they didn't show it. They dropped the context. They dropped the context on Trump. That's it, on some level. Meaning they showed all of the clownish stuff, and they would give him all the free media and everything else. But what the people were seeing in the rallies and what the people were hearing and what they were reading was not the same thing that people who were, let's say, of a particular social persuasion could see and read. They just saw, oh, my God, this guy's a clown. This guy's a buffoon. Well, at the same token, Donald Trump was saying the things that they needed on some level to hear that nobody else was saying. And, he looked like them on some level, if that makes sense. Right. Like, he didn't come across as this kind of elitist thing. I'm curious from your take on this. With going forward, we're going to get an infrastructure bill. And Manchin, and they are basically trying to drag this bill down less and less and less and less. And, the whole less and less thing gets to this whole thing of, okay, you're in power. You have the power to do something. Now, what are you going to do with it? And instead of doing something aggressive with it or assertive with it, you end up transitioning back to basically business as usual and normality. And people like Manchin gets to basically be the bag holders. Is Manchin being used for the fall guy for something that Biden just doesn't want to do at all? Is it that?
I do think it's that, but I think it's more too. So I think a lot of people are being hoodwinked by CNN, MSNBC, all these people who are really selling this narrative that what Manchin and Sinema are doing are really trying to, work with Republicans and bipartisanship and blah, 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 blah. But the reality is the reason that Manchin has played hardball, particularly on the infrastructure bill, is really only to strip the climate provisions out of it. I mean, that's really what has boiled down when you move it from $2.2 trillion to $1 trillion. And in reality, even that $1 trillion, there's only $500 billion of new money in there. All the climate provisions have been stripped out.
Well, that's in the Senate bill. And the House bill, the House has just passed their bill, which is basically putting those climate provisions in, which ends up with this kind of ping pong back and forth, meaning the House bill can basically crash all of this if Biden is willing to go along without the climate provisions. And apparently, how to pay for it comes later. So even that, meaning initially there was supposed to be this kind of tax increase in order to pay for these other items. And that doesn't seem, look, we'll see. What do you think happens with this? I mean, because you're right. I agree with you. That seems to be what was taking place in the Senate. All right, the House put their bill out. The climate provisions are in. Where does Biden fall?
First off, the House is only important if you have, I don't know, do we have enough progressives with the will to
No.
Politics 101?
No.
And block bills? So the House is really irrelevant unless, the squad plus, we'll call it, this group of 8 or 9 progressives say, no, we're not going for that.
Well, no, it's not that I give them any credibility for doing anything like that. They've shown themselves that they don't necessarily have that. The $15 an hour minimum wage, for example, that is something to die on a flag to get over the finish line. Even if it is your last term, meaning if I pass this bill and I would never be in Congress again, I am going to go to my grave knowing that 40 million people have gotten an increase in their raise. That's what that type of bill is for, because it's something that is on the progressive wish list, on the public's and America's wish list, that for the first time you had it in your target, in your sights. And they didn't have the spine to say, yes, we're going to let this COVID bill drop in the exact same way that Manchin let the bill drop in order to get this over. So no, I don't expect that. However, what I do say or think, I do think on some level, the House is further to the left on a lot of the stuff than the Senate. And so when they're putting out this provision, this is the House's interpretation, or this is what we want, basically. And that's, by the way, stripped down in and of itself. And so I don't know, I mean, do you think the House is going to budge so easily and just fall apart on this, like the other bills? That's what I'm getting at. Because I don't need the squad to do that. If the House itself says, okay, yeah, this is what we kind of want. Very close margins, this is what we want. What's going to happen?
I think your audience needs to understand that the House, under Nancy Pelosi, it's all messaging. I mean, look at the HEROES Act. That was the $3 trillion proposal they put forward during COVID last year. They knew that was not going to go anywhere in the Senate, so they could virtue signal and say,
exactly,
you want all of these amazing things, but these terrible Republicans blocking it. What this is also messaging. So, frankly, so is the voting rights bill because they knew Republicans would block it too. So they could use it for the midterms and running with the same playbook that they've run for the last 30 years. Look at the Republicans, not at us. It's all messaging. So then when you go to the Senate, the reality is Joe Biden and his donors, it's not, I think bipartisanship is a mythical thing that the corporate media has created, when in reality what bipartisanship means is what the donors will allow. That's what bipartisanship means, what the donors will allow.
The common ground, the lowest common denominator of what, everybody, the big money wants, that kind of thing. I get what you're saying there. You said that the House is a theatrical. I'm slightly paraphrasing. And this also, we're going to pivot here briefly. Does this extend to the new select committee on January 6th, which, event I know you covered? In other words, is this a mere theatrical pushback against the Republicans, or do you see some serious Patriot Act style crackdowns, like a lot of people are worried about, coming out of either this committee or the wider pushback against January 6th? Jordan, what's your take?
I don't think it will be as bad as the Patriot Act because the Republican Party has reason to try and block it for political reasons.
Yeah.
But since the Democrats do have subpoena power in this case, I think there will be things that come out of it, but I don't think it will be as bad as the Patriot Act.
I guess here's where I'm going. What is inevitably going to come out of this, and what this is, I think, sort of first and foremost designed to do as a baseline, is create a narrative that will, on a drip-by-drip basis, constantly be percolating through the minds of the people watching the media on this, from the PR, the optical perspective, that kind of thing. But that doesn't mean that prosecutions, a gutting of the RNC, or legislative push, like we were talking about with the Patriot Act. If it's a spectrum between one and the other, between theater and action, where do you think it's going to fall? I'm curious, hearing from you particularly, because your video on this, which got removed from YouTube on this event, was taken down. You have, in a weird way, skin in the game, and so I'm just curious. I know you think about this stuff. Where do you see it falling, Jordan?
Yeah, and I just want to shout out, because I actually wasn't there as my cameraman. He did amazing work, John Farina. But I actually think there will be action that comes out of it because, again, I think it's that Democrats want to use it for 2022. I think, to me, it's pretty damn clear that there was a lot of warnings that came in literally months before that this was going to happen that were ignored. I think it's pretty clear that there were Republican politicians that were collaborating with some of these organizers and activists. Maybe they didn't know exactly what was going to happen, but they were collaborating beforehand on, the marches and things like that.
Well, wait. So stop there for a moment. So do you believe that they should have a bipartisan January 6th commission? Because if you're saying that there were Republicans involved, that's a big deal.
No, I do think there should be a commission. Do I think it requires endless 24/7 coverage 6 months later? No, I don't. I do think there should be a commission, absolutely.
But what's the point of having this show if you don't have an audience? What's the point of having the investigation if it's not serving as a useful, drawn out media campaign? Jordan, it's a rhetorical question, I suppose.
There's two separate things: the media and the actual. Should we investigate?
Right, the reality of things. Right.
Yeah. Should we investigate the surge on the Capitol? Because honestly, I think if you don't, there aren't actual consequences, it's only going to get worse.
Exactly.
I don't know if you saw the Trump rally in Ohio, but this cult is getting worse. So, and by the way, it's not just Republicans, too. I mean, you don't want this happening. Trust me, if those were black people that stormed the gates or indigenous people, you'd have a lot more people dead. So, to me, I think the problem really is not so much an investigation into it. I think it's the weaponization of it by the media, by the Democratic Party, that we're literally going to be talking about this in January, February, March of next year.
Yeah.
It's going to be one of the main topics for midterm ads. That's the problem. I think they could have an investigation that is kind of behind the scenes. It doesn't require 24/7 coverage. That's my thoughts. But ultimately, I don't think much will come out of it, no.
Well, if you're saying that there were Republicans back, I mean, I guess the question becomes, does it happen? And, they're going to have subpoena power. Look, I agree with you. I think they should investigate this. And I think they should get behind the scenes to see whether or not there was more to it. And just because I think it's going to be used as a political cudgel doesn't necessarily mean that it shouldn't exist. I mean, both things can be true. It's not that I like the cudgel part. It's that I don't know how to wed it away from it, if that makes sense. Like I don't know, disambiguate, Shane would say, one from the other.
But here's the thing: what are they actually going to discover? What is the nature? Okay, so I'm guessing, and this is a guess because it has to be. We'll see what actually comes out. If there is some collusion between the congressmen, congresswomen, and the protesters, whatever, the claims about collusion, the bulk of it is probably going to be fairly diffuse and vague and like backseat communications. We'll see, but it's probably not going to be anything as brazen as like Ted Cruz or Matt Gaetz or somebody suborning. Yeah. Okay, here are your orders. You get where I'm going with this, which means if it's going to be that vague, what is the response to it going to be? What could the response to it be? In other words, if there's not a direct conspiracy to break down, isn't this just going to lead to more sort of, again, I'll overuse the word, vague recriminations against this bulk of people who we were talking about in sort of familiar and even fond terms just 10 minutes ago, people who really what they want is just for their wages to rise and for their roads to be better and for their schools to be functioning, that kind of thing. Isn't this just going to turn into that kind of big pushback against nothing, what amounts to just a diffuse, dangerous cultural movement? Jordan, what's your take on that?
Yeah, that's why I think it should be behind the scenes and
not out in public
at the same time. I also think, let's just call it what it is. A major part why the Democrats are doing this is they're desperate to keep Trump's name in the news.
Yes.
And so is corporate media. If you've looked at CNN and MSNBC's ratings that have nosedived, Trump has been off Twitter and not the president anymore. So I think part of it, a major part of this is keeping Trump's name in the news, keeping Trump as a threat for potential reelection or, whatever in the news, because that's really all the cable news has anymore to keep their viewers. And I think the Democratic Party wants to use Trump and now Marjorie Taylor Greene as the boogeyman.
As their boogeyman, exactly. But isn't that just going to boost Trump? Isn't that just keeping his name recognition is eternal, but like, he's still the main political figure in the Republican Party. Aren't they just giving him, is that actually going to work to do anything? Or is that weirdly them, being hoisted by their own petard, the media? Jordan, what's your take?
Oh, I agree with you too, but don't underestimate the stupidity of the Democratic Party. They just won narrowly at the presidential level, not really because of strategy, really because if not for COVID and Trump's mishandling, I think he would have beat Biden in a landslide probably. But they think, oh, well, we just won, basically calling Trump Lucifer and the candidate saying nothing's going to change. So, if it ain't broke, don't fix it.
That's the worst thing about the 2020 election. It's one of the worst things, is that it's like, is it really a vindication? Is it going to be received as a vindication of 2016 and everything that followed? Is the DNC going to see this as, okay, that worked. Yes. Let's double down. It seems like so far the answer is yes. Grimly.
They also think, wrongly, it would have worked, but Hillary was a terrible candidate.
Yeah.
I think the problem wasn't that they are ignoring everything you just said, the actual issues on the ground, that they've literally shifted to kind of cater to upper middle class yuppie professionals and forgot the working class. They think it's really just they had a bad candidate, and that's why if we had Biden, who is more better polling wise, favorability, isn't hated as much, has kind of this lunch bucket Joe kind of persona. If we just run against Trump, it will work, and that's partially, by the way, why they put Kamala Harris on the ticket and why they want Kamala Harris to be a big star, because, you could have an invisibility cloak over her. Any criticism is sexist, racist, you name it. So I think that, it's a terrible idea. I think Republicans are going to win back the Senate and the House. I do not think if all of the Democratic Party does is run on, we put shots in your arms, money in your pockets, and that's it. There's nothing more. Those same people, that same increase in terms of black voters and other voters that came out on the presidential level, they will not be coming out on the midterm level for the Democratic Party.
No, it's a bit stuck in time. That might have played like a year ago, but like we got our vaccines in our arms, we got some cash, and sure, people want more cash, but it seems like they're pushing for more than just more cash. Jordan, we got to close here. Fun conversation. Good talking with you a bit more. Jordan Sheridan, thanks for talking with us.
Thanks, guys. Appreciate it.
Appreciate it. Jordan Sheridan is an investigative reporter and co-founder and CEO of Status Coup. That's a progressive media outlet that features investigative and in-field reporting on politics, social justice issues, and the environment. And I do believe that if you want to support their work, you can go check out statusquo.com. You can find more info there. They have like a Patreon-style subscription setup. I remember talking with him about this last time we had him on. Anyway, Jordan Sheridan, great conversation. We're going into our break. Coming back in the last segment of today's show, 202-521-1320 is the phone number. Again, that's 202-521-1320. When we come back, we hope to hear from you. You're listening to Fault Lines. Be back on the other side of this short break.
Fault Lines.
Epidemics and pandemics could kill millions of people, and they actually did. Centuries ago, deadly outbreaks called the Black Death, the plague of Justinian, and the Spanish flu ravaged countries, empires, and whole continents. Some of these diseases are still present around the globe. Others have become a thing of the past. Discover how these ancient and not-so-distant outbreaks from previous centuries differ from modern-day SARS, MERS, and coronavirus pandemics. Listen to our new series, Outbreak, the deadliest epidemics in human history. This week on Radio Sputnik.
Fault Lines.
And we're back in the wrap. I'm going to 202-521-1320 is the phone number. And we got folks on the line briefly, though. Jamarl, you just brought up a story that I wanted to highlight.
Yeah, there's a story from the Wall Street Journal. And this is basically saying for some vendors, the article, Amazon demands one more thing for some vendors, basically a piece of the company. Certain suppliers are asked to give Amazon the right to buy shares that potentially lower the market rates as part of their contract. That's amazing.
So basically, if you're a company that wants to work with Amazon, this big behemoth that has a lot of opportunities, in order to work with them, it seems you have to give them the right to own part of you.
That is insane. And then you think about it, it's like, well, dude, it's a free choice. It's a free choice. This is a capitalistic system. It's a free choice. And it's like, okay, but you have the free choice of what? Not being on Amazon's platform. And that platform basically has this dominating presence where if not that platform, you go bust. All right? Take a piece of the company. Is that a free choice? You could say so. It's like a free choice to eat on some level. I mean, yeah, we got to go through this article, but that is amazing.
Was it a free choice when they got the USPS subsidies, that whole program? You know what I mean? When they were able to work with them so closely, get such cheap shipping.
Yeah.
The lines are not so clearly drawn. Anyway.
That's amazing.
We got a few callers. I want to make sure we have time to them.
I read the article. I was like, whoa, that's some mob stuff.
It is. Yeah,
like,
it is big.
You have a nice company here. You want to keep that company shining, sparkling, and profitable? Yeah. All right. Well, I need a little bit of that stock. That's amazing.
Yeah, it's like an ownership racket or something.
Yeah.
I hear you. Yeah. In order to get a leg up, these people need to give away a part of the,
that's wild.
Part of their ownership of their own company. Anyway, couple callers on the line. 202-521-1320 is the number. Michael, calling in from Sydney. You're on the line. What's on your mind?
Yeah, hey guys. Look, I'll figure out the first thing first and the second thing second, and then I hope I get a right of reply. Basically, what Shane was saying earlier about the Boy Scouts and teachers, I totally agree with Shane. I think it'd be a good idea if there was an organisation that you could trust to take your kids and teach them survival skills and just basic, get them out in the woods. It's not a bad idea. I've taken my daughter out in the woods and, teach her some basic stuff. But I don't know the basic stuff. I never had the opportunity to do it. And from the sounds of it, I'm thankful I didn't. But at the same time, I think it's a good idea. And in answer to you, Jamal.
Look, Michael, I don't, it's not that I don't want something like that, if that makes sense. I think I even started off saying I would love, or people should be able to trust other people.
I caught you in what appeared to me to be a contradiction, and like a shark going after blood. I was like, I'm going to go after, I spotted a weakness. I felt a weakness.
But there's no contradiction. I don't know the contradiction.
I hear you.
I wouldn't do it, if that makes sense.
Yeah. You wouldn't send your kids to the Boy Scouts. And then I was like, should it exist?
And should it exist is something different. I wouldn't do it. I mean, but I wouldn't do it for all sorts of reasons of oh my God, I live at a time with Catholic priests, etc., and I live at a time with the Boy Scouts. No, I'm not doing that.
Yeah.
That's me, right? Should something like that, or would it be cool if people could trust something? Of course it would be cool if people could trust stuff like that. I don't think people should, I think it's screwed up that people are paranoid about whether or not, if I send my kid to this institution, whether it's a place of education, whether it's a college, whether it's, colleges, they have date rape, or at schools, you may have other kids messing with other kids, that type of stuff. It would be great, at the very least, for the teachers or the people who are in those institutions to be paragons of virtue, or at the very least, virtue in regards to my kid. And I would like to know that in a way that lungs know air.
Well, because think about it like this. Where do you you're a parent. Where do you send your kids to? You send them. In other words, when they're not at home, you send them for various purposes. You go with them to church. You send them to school. They have to go to school. And then there are these extracurricular activity groups that if people can afford them, if they live in the right neighborhoods, whatever, they'll often have their kids join these organizations like the Boy Scouts. In other words, the choices. You see what I'm saying? It's so much of what's available to them seems to be corrupted that it's pretty damn sad. Michael, you had a second point, and you also wanted a right to reply.
I was actually still on my first point. But anyway, I'll continue with the first point, then I'll just continue on to the second. You can discuss the first point if you want to. In terms of what Shane was saying about teachers being pedophiles, I mean, how many times, I know it happens very often here in Australia, you hear on the news every time there's a pedophile ring busted, it's judges, lawyers, politicians, teachers, and policemen. They're always amongst the group of people who get busted. So I'll just say that and leave it there. And then I'll go on to my second point, and maybe Shane can come up with a good quote with this. He knows more about philosophy and so the quotes and stuff than I probably do. Machiavelli talks about power and what people will do to obtain power and keep power. And politics is all about maintaining and keeping power. It's all about power. And politicians, no one ever gives up power. The object of obtaining power is maintaining power. And something Mao actually had in common with the founding fathers is he said power comes at the barrel of a gun, right? And America understands that. They've had the Second Amendment, or the First Amendment, the Second Amendment, the right to bear arms, because they understand that power comes at the barrel of a gun. If you don't have the ability to overthrow your government, you are powerless against them, right? So basically, the Founding Fathers and Mao actually have something in common. A lot of people would argue about that, but I totally agree. Power does come at the barrel of a gun. And basically, at the end of the day, there are a lot of problems with the right to bear arms and all that type of stuff, and a lot of people criticise it. But if you don't have the ability to fight back against your government, if they are oppressing you, and I've suffered oppression in my own country, I'm actually a cognitive dissident. I commit cognition, and I have no way of fighting back. And just secondly, we're in lockdown here in Sydney. We're currently under the fascist boot heel of the medical officer, who is not a non-elected public official, who was never elected by the public, makes all laws in New South Wales regarding lockdown. But I'm lucky enough to be able to, with my girlfriend and her friends.
Glad to hear it. Michael, we got a couple more callers. Real quickly on Machiavelli, another side of this, he's the one, it's better to be feared than loved, is, a quote commonly associated with him, and an idea that shows up in like The Mob and all these different places. The book that came from the Prince, his best known work, arguably a deceptive work. He was writing this for the Medici family, who he didn't like, a family that had imprisoned him. But a lot of people think, looking back, is he basically wrote that piece of advice and a lot of the other pieces of advice as bad advice to get them to make bad decisions because he didn't like them. And there's this thing about Discourses on Livy, his other work, where it's his real advice. Anyway, that's getting into the weeds. The bit about the power coming out of the barrel of a gun also comes out of ideas in a lot of cases, though. That's the thing. I mean, the pen can be mightier than the sword. And the whole... Anyway, 1776, not just about the barrel of a gun, also about some of the ideas at play. But hey, the gun certainly made it happen, practically. We have more calls. Tarif calling in from New Orleans. You're on the line. What's on your mind?
How you doing? Thanks for taking my call. I think the so-called people that want to keep the old order and control is becoming more and more enhanced. These corrupt globalist bureaucrats, because the more and more information is coming out, especially with the support of Julian Assange, picking up steam from different parliamentarians, and you have Tucker Carlson with the NSA leak thing. If that comes out, then you have McCaffrey, the situation what happened, the incident what happened with McCaffrey and stuff. You got
McAfee. You're talking about, right? John McAfee?
McAfee. Yeah. Excuse me, McAfee. I think
Ann McCaffrey is the
information.
Anyway, go for it, Tree.
Yeah, these information that might start coming out might start damaging these people. And I just saw a look down the map with Africa, how Africa is going more and more to the east. So it's like all these things at once is coming, and I feel to believe these so-called globalists is starting to become unhinged because they can't stop it. So we got to keep on pushing for the freedom of doing science, keep on pushing for the freedom of people around the world, and stopping these wars.
So, Reef, agreed. Thank you for the call. Agreed. I think the thing with it is they've been having that problem for a long time. How to stop the train wreck or whatever, how to stop this like wave of populist movements. That was like the 60s, wasn't it? And it, you know, how to respond to that. And then they kind of co-opted it. And then that's just the dialectic there, whatever. We got another call. Anthony calling in from, I believe it is Detroit. Anthony, you're on. What's on your mind?
All right, 30 seconds. Let me go. I thought it was interesting, the conversation earlier. You know, the little spat, or, you know, good natured spat back and forth. Because I thought it, I thought
about the Boy Scouts, right? Yeah.
Really parallel to, I think, Jamarl, the frustration with the obstructionist, like, you know, Shane's behavior was like really parallel to kind of my feelings, you know, with that, you know, attitude in general, despite, you know, and obviously, you know, despite like my enjoyment of your guys' character, you know, which is like great, and then conversations in general and everything, a show that is less hardline directional, you know, more akin to, Crystal and Saga, like you guys are like the Crystal and Saga of the radio, you know what I'm saying? If that, you know, I think that would be a fair. I think you can get frustrated with the show that is less hardline left narrative or your narrative, you know.
Yeah, because we try to disagree on stuff. And I think that unlike Crystal and Sagar,
they never did.
They didn't disagree with each other. They disagreed with the guests. Jamarl and I, at first, we were like, we agree on a lot of stuff. And we do. But we also have gotten more friendly with like disagreeing. And we've gotten to know each other better. You get to trust each other. Anyway, Anthony, thank you for the call. Please call back in sometime. Fault Lines with Thomas and Stranahan. We're off on Monday because it's July 4th. Have a great weekend and see you on Tuesday, 7 a.m. Eastern.